Chapter 1217. Xiaolan's words had exposed the biggest stain in Ning Jing's life. Ning Jing's heart skipped a beat, but she had nothing to say. She had indeed drugged Tang Li back then. If it weren't for that freak combination of factors, she probably wouldn't have gotten together with Tang Li. Fifth Elder, you dared to leak the secret? Tang Li was especially angry. Back then, he had been drugged by Ning Jing and forced into marriage by the D clan. In the Tang sect, other than his parents, only a few elders knew about it. Without a doubt, Fifth Elder must have told Xiao Lan about it. Fifth Elder finally regained his senses, but he didn't know how to explain. Guards, take this person away for this sect master to deal with. The Xiao clan has a lot of crimes to commit. Tang Li ordered sternly. No matter how unreasonable the Elders' Council was, they still obeyed the Tang family. Tang Zijin, the old sect master, didn't care about anything. So what could Fifth Elder and the Elders' Council do to Tang Li? Moreover, the entire Tang sect knew that Tang Li had his older brother behind him. Fifth Elder and Madame Xiao were so hopeless that they had no strength left. They let the guards take them away, but Xiao Lan struggled like a madwoman. Tang Li, answer me. Answer me. Ning Jing is the same as me. Ning Jing, you touched that drug, so you'll never be clean? Ning Jing looked at them expressionlessly, but Tang Li strode in front of Xiao Lan and said coldly, "Only I know whether Ning Jing is clean or not. It has nothing to do with anyone else, much less you. As for whether you're clean or not, I don't know. I don't want to know." As he spoke, he took a guard's belt and tied it around Xiao Lan's mouth, making her unable to speak or make a sound. As for the guard whose belt was taken away, he awkwardly held his pants and ran away. Fifth Elder suddenly exclaimed, "Sect Master! Sect Master! This subordinate chooses to be a servant. This subordinate is willing to be a servant." Would Tang Li still care about Fifth Elder's choice? No. He looked at the people who were gradually being taken away, and a trace of viciousness flashed across his eyes. Since the Fifth Elder dared to leak the secret, there was no guarantee that the others would do the same. When that time came, who knew how badly Ning Jing would be scolded? Rather than letting others spread rumors, he might as well admit it himself. He was drugged. He was willing to be drugged by Ning Jing. So what? "Guards!" Tang Li shouted. The attendant hurriedly ran over. "Sect Master, write a few announcements and post them. Say that Xiao Dong offended his superior and disrespected Madame Jing. Xiao Lan harbored evil intentions and seduced me. Fifth, Xiao Dong's position as an elder will be abolished, and the entire Xiao clan will be demoted to servants." Tang Li thought for a moment, then said, "If you don't want to spread the word, just say that only Ning Jing can drug this sect leader. Everyone else should be careful. This sect leader will never take a concubine in this lifetime." A public notice and a verbal message. Although it didn't explicitly state what Xiao Lan had done, it was enough to make everyone speculate. Xiao Lan could only live forever in rumors and slanders. When Tang Li said this, the attendant felt awkward. Was the sect master really going to put the word drug on the table? Not to mention the guards. Even Madame Tang couldn't bear to watch. "Elite, don't mess around. Just punish the entire Xiao clan. Why are you talking about drugging? Isn't that embarrassing?" Madame Tang said unhappily. Ning Jing's tense face finally couldn't help but reveal a smile. She felt both helpless and happy. "So what if it's embarrassing? I'm happy." Tang Li had an indifferent expression. He didn't look like a sect leader at all. He was more like a hooligan. However, it was precisely his shameless behavior that intimidated the elders of the Tang sect, and also dispelled those who coveted the position of madam in the Tang sect. Perhaps Tang Li's position as sect master had been stabilized because of this incident. Tang Li's style was completely different from Tang Zijin's. With Tang Li in charge of the Tang sect, it was hard to imagine how the Tang sect style would develop in the future. Of course, this was all for later. Madame Tang doted on her son and had never been able to refuse him. Perhaps it was because of Madame Tang's excessive doting and Tang Zijin's excessive strictness that he had long since developed Tang Li's temper. Or perhaps it was because he had been sheltered by Xian Yuanyi since he was young that Tang, Li could have such a carefree temper. The words "won't take a concubine" had always lingered in Ning Jing's ears. To her, this was definitely the most beautiful words of love in the world, the most important promise. Unfortunately, she couldn't bear it. She had just made up her mind that she would return Tang Li his freedom. The Tang sect couldn't restrain him, and the D clan definitely couldn't restrain him. She was even more unwilling to restrain him. "Mother, go and find father. I have something important to tell you." Ning Jing finally spoke. Tang Li turned around with a puzzled expression. "Ning Jing, what do you have to say to my father?" His tone showed just how much he disliked Tang Zijin. "It's very important. I have to say it seriously." Ning Jing's expression was solemn. At this moment, Tang Li sensed that something was wrong. Although Ning Jing was usually a very serious woman, her current expression told him that what she was about to say was no small matter. "Why do you have to tell my parents something important? You could just tell me?" Tang Li walked over and grabbed Ning Jing's hand. "Come, let's go back and talk. I'll leave." Mrs. Tang shouted pitifully. She wanted to cry, but had no tears. Ning Jing was hurriedly dragged away by Tang Li and didn't have a chance to say anything. "This is very important. Tang Li, when I gave birth to my daughter, I had no choice but to use the drug to induce labor. The price is that I can't get pregnant again. I can't give birth to a son for you." Ning Jing said it out of the blue. She didn't mention the hardships she suffered during childbirth or the various illnesses she suffered during her confinement after giving birth. She just casually mentioned the result. Tang Li and Mrs. Tang were stunned. They never thought that the important thing Ning Jing was talking about would be like this. Tang Li was dumbfounded. Mrs. Tang's face turned pale. She didn't dare to believe it and didn't want to believe it. If Ning Jing couldn't give birth to a son, then wouldn't the Tang sect? Wouldn't it be extinct? Mrs. Tang panicked and murmured, "Ali, we have to tell father about this." "We can't." Before Mrs. Tang could finish, Tang Li said angrily, "You can't tell him." "Ali, isn't this a small matter?" Mrs. Tang murmured. She could let Tang Li do whatever he wanted, no matter how big the matter was. However, she couldn't let him mess around with this matter. When it came to carrying on the family line, she couldn't make the decision. "Mother, even you want to force us to leave?" Tang Li murmured. As soon as he said this, Mrs. Tang's tears fell. "Mother didn't. Why would I?" "Tang Li, don't." Ning Jing was about to speak when Tang Li interrupted her angrily. "Ning Jing, why did you say it out loud? Why did you tell them? Are you stupid?" Ning Jing was at a loss for words. This was probably the first time Tang Li had yelled at her after being together with Tang Li for so long. Why did she have to say it out loud? She should have kept it a secret long ago. She should have taken Tang Tang down the mountain and left with Tang Li. However, she didn't leave. She even went up the mountain. A few months ago, on the first day she returned to the Tang sect, she knew that she would have to tell them about this matter one day. She had no right to hide this matter. This wasn't just about her and Tang Li. It was about the Tang sect. She couldn't help Tang Li refuse to take a concubine and hide this matter at the same time. There were 3 ways to be unfilial, but having no descendants was the worst. No matter how much Tang Li and Tang Zijin fought, they were still father and son. She couldn't frame Tang Li for being unfilial. Otherwise, she would have taken Tang Li away from the Tang sect a long time ago. Moreover, her brother had been entrusted with the mission of the D clan. He was destined to never be willful. It was the same for Tang Li. He had inherited everything from the Tang sect. He couldn't be willful either. Ning Jing didn't answer. Tang Li was very angry. He asked again, "Why?" "Because you're the Tang sect leader." Ning Jing summarized everything with the simplest sentence. Mrs. Tang looked at her daughter-in-law and didn't know what to say. This was the first time she felt so lucky that Tang Li had married such a woman. However, Tang Li kept shaking his head. He still didn't understand why he fell in love with Ning Jing, why he forgave her for drugging him, and why he was willing to serve her. The two of them were actually polar opposites. Their temperaments were completely different. For Ning Jing, there were some things that couldn't be done. There were some rules that had to be followed. Marriage was the only thing she had rebelled against. For him, if he didn't like something, he didn't like it. If he didn't want to do it, he didn't want to do it. He never wanted to be forced. The marriage was also the only time he had compromised. I'm the Tang sect leader? And then? Tang Li continued to ask. I don't object to you taking a concubine. Ning Jing was surprisingly calm. So, after all this fuss, you wanted to take a concubine? Ha 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 ha. Tang Li laughed bitterly at himself. Ning Jing, what if I refuse? Then I will. Ning Jing hesitated. Tang Li's gaze turned icy as he stared at her. He didn't rush her, but waited patiently. Mrs. Tang was also waiting. She was suddenly afraid that Ning Jing, who couldn't be forced to leave, would willingly give up her position as the Tang sect leader's wife. Tang Li wasn't afraid either. He was flustered and afraid. If Ning Jing dared to say that she wanted to leave, he would definitely take revenge on her. He would take revenge on her ruthlessly. She couldn't leave so irresponsibly after disturbing his heart. Finally, Tang Li lost his patience. Say it. Ning Jing's expression was still calm and slightly cold. She looked at the furious Tang Li and felt that he was a stranger yet familiar. She said, Tang Li, if you refuse to take a concubine, then I will be very happy. After she said that, she laughed. Actually, what she wanted to say was that if he refused to take a concubine, she would divorce him and leave. From then on, whether he married or not, whether he had a son or not, it would have nothing to do with her. However, she couldn't convince herself to say something against her will. Tang Li was stunned. After a while, he came back to his senses. Without another word, he pulled Ning Jing into his arms and kissed her fiercely. No matter how different the two of them were, as long as they were willing to treat each other as exceptions, no matter how big the problem was, it wouldn't be a problem. After Tang Li had kissed enough, he hugged Ning Jing tightly and whispered in her ear, Silly, why would you have a son? I just like daughters. It's enough to serve you and our daughter. Any more? Ha. And I can't serve you anymore. Ning Jing never knew that Tang Li's voice could be so gentle. Her heart melted when she heard it. Mrs. Tang looked at them with a complicated expression. What should she do? Chapter 12:18. Tang Li was about to pull Ning Jing away when Madame Tang finally spoke up. Ali, come back. We have to talk about this properly. Don't mess around. After the new year, let's go to Medical City and have a look at 4th Misren. Maybe there's hope? 4th Misren has already taken a look, Ning Jing said mildly. Gu Beiwei and 4th Misren had both taken a look and came to the conclusion that she couldn't be cured. Madame Tang didn't know what else to do, so she used treatment as an excuse to delay. She didn't dare to promise Tang Li that he wouldn't take any more concubines or have any more children, but she also didn't dare to force Tang Li. She also didn't know what would happen if Tang Zijin found out about this. Ali, how about, Mother, you've been busy the whole day. You can't go back and rest. Let me think about this. I'll tell Father tomorrow. You and Ning Jing shouldn't go. Madame Tang wanted to say something, but Tang Li looked impatient. Is that okay? Madame Tang was resentful, but she didn't dare to push too hard. She could only agree. Where's my daughter? Tang Li asked. He didn't even remember how many months he had been playing with little Tang Tang. In his mind, little Tang Tang was still a tiny baby who would cry whenever she was hungry. Yes. Let's go see your daughter, Madame Tang hurriedly said. Madame Tang hurriedly said. She would never forget the countless times that little Tang Tang had looked at her foolish father with a blank look on her face. The three of them left the back of the mountain and walked forward. Soon, Tang Li noticed a large patch of daisies nearby. The white petals and pale yellow stamens were Ning Jing's favorite. He ran to the top of the mountain and looked around. Crouching Dragon Peak was covered in daisies. This cold mountain peak had become a sea of flowers. He looked back at Ning Jing. Who planted them? A man helped me plant it in order to make me happy. Ning Jing joked. Who? Tang Li became serious. Who? Madame Tang laughed. Brat, who else would dare to touch the soil of Crouching Dragon Peak other than you? Tang Li scratched his head and tried hard to recall, but in the end, he could not remember. He looked at Ning Jing and smiled foolishly. I'll get him to help you plant daisies all over the Crouching Dragon Mountain range. We'll change the name of this mountain to Chrysanthemum Mountain. Mrs. Tang and Ning Jing did not know whether to laugh or cry. However, Tang Li secretly remembered this matter. Although he had lost his memories of the past few months, he still left behind these flowers. This proved that even if he had lost his mind, he was still willing to work hard for Ning Jing. How much time and effort did it take to plant these flowers all over the mountain, plant them one by one, and plant them all over the mountain? Tang Li thought that if he spent another 2 years, he should be able to cut down all the trees in this mountain range and replace them with daisies. The three of them went to Madame Tang's courtyard and did not say much. Ning Jing's matter seemed to have been temporarily forgotten. Madame Tang was about to call for someone to bring little Tang Tang over when little Tang Tang suddenly rushed out from the flowers and hugged Tang Li's legs. She looked up at him. "Daddy, bow bow." Bow bow. Little Tang Tang's big eyes were filled with strong desire and stubbornness. Her childish voice was not very accurate, and she said the word hug instead of bag, but everyone understood. She seemed to like being hugged by Tang Li very much. When Tang Li picked her up, she looked at Ning Jing with a happy face and sweetly said, "Mother." She was not even 2 years old and was still immature. She had already forgotten about the conflict she had witnessed the day before. For the current her, the happiest thing was to be hugged by her father and be able to see her mother. Tang Li carried little Tang Tang to the side and sat down. He put little Tang Tang on his lap and let her sit properly. "Daughter, don't move. Let Daddy take a good look at you," he said seriously. Children were immature, but they were very sensitive. Little Tang Tang immediately sensed that something was wrong with her father and felt that he was not the same as before. However, she could not tell what was different. Daddy looked at her seriously, and she also looked at him seriously. Thus, father and daughter sat like this, staring at each other with wide eyes. The more Tang Li looked at his daughter, the more he liked her. There were some similarities between his daughter and Ning Jing, but she still looked more like Ning Jing. However, she was definitely twice as beautiful as Ning Jing. Her features were delicate and pretty, as if they were carved from jade. They were flawless, clean, and impeccable. Tang Li could not bear to look away. At this moment, he was pondering in his heart. This was his biological daughter. How could he bear to marry her off in the future? He absolutely could not accept it. Little Tang Tang also stared at her father. She found that her father's eyes were especially lively and beautiful today. Although they were the same person, she liked this father more than the one from before who did not speak much and almost never smiled. She grinned at her father. Seeing his daughter smile, Tang Li liked her even more. He wished he could hold her in his hands and dote on her for the rest of his life. "Tang Tang, do you like Daddy more or Mommy more?" Tang Li asked seriously. Ning Jing and Mrs. Tang sat at the side. They looked at each other speechlessly. This was the first thing this guy said to his daughter after waking up. What else could Ning Jing do other than ignore it? She had to admit that little Tang Tang liked her father more. "Daddy." Little Tang Tang replied in her childish voice. Her little hand was restless as she reached for Tang Li's mouth and said, "Mouth, mouth." Tang Li was confused. What did his daughter mean? He looked at Ning Jing for help, but Ning Jing ignored him. He looked at Mrs. Tang and asked, "What does she want to do? Is she going to kiss her?" Mrs. Tang smiled. "Yes, that's the mouth." "Tang Tang, tell Daddy, where's the nose?" Tang Li understood. He lowered his head, but little Tang Tang pinched the tip of Tang Li's nose and said with a smile, "Nose, nose." Tang Li was in pain, but he gladly endured it. He chuckled and said, "Yes, the nose. This is the nose." Little Tang Tang was learning how to speak and recognize things. "What about the eyes? Where are the eyes?" Tang Li asked again. Little Tang Tang immediately widened her eyes for Tang Li to see. She was clearly widening her eyes, but she still gritted her teeth and continued to widen them. Her serious look made Tang Li laugh out loud. Tang Li wasn't a patient man, but he played with little Tang Tang over and over again in a game like drawing facial features. Ning Jing sat at the side and watched silently. She counted carefully. This father and daughter pair had gone back and forth more than 20 times, but they weren't bored at all. This man was always more patient with his daughter than he was with his wife. Looking at the father and daughter pair going back and forth, gesturing and laughing happily, Ning Jing couldn't help but wonder if Tang Li would prefer Tang Tang or his son if she gave birth to a son for him. She didn't know how Tang Li planned to discuss the matter with Tang Zijin tomorrow. How could Madame Tang not be worried about this matter as well? Both mother and daughter-in-law were worried sick, but Tang Li was having a lot of fun with little Tang Tang. He smiled like a child, carefree and pure. Finally, Tang Li suddenly looked up and asked, "Ning Jing, have we named our daughter?" "Not yet. We're waiting for you," Ning Jing said. "Tang." Tang Li thought for a while. Tang? Tang. Tang Hongdo. Mrs. Tang immediately spat out the tea in her mouth. She scolded, "Stinking brat. A girl's name is very important. Is there a father like you? Why don't you learn from your brother? He gave your nephew such a good name. My sister-in-law gave birth to a boy." Tang Li was very surprised. "When we went to the military camp, you even held him once. Did you forget?" Ning Jing asked. "It's really a boy?" Tang Li asked again. "How can it be fake?" Mrs. Tang rolled her eyes in displeasure. "Ali, your little nephew is named Rue, Xinyuan Rue. Listen to his name, then think about your Hongdo." Tang Li didn't pay attention to Lady Tang's words at all. His lips curved up into a gloating smile. "Son, very good. My brother likes sons." "Ning Jing, you say, how can this name be? Change it." Mrs. Tang was very fussy about the name. "Hongdo, Hongdo," Ning Jing muttered. She remembered the sweet red bean porridge she often ate. She didn't think it was tacky. She said, "He's the father. He can make the decision." No, I'll think of a few for you later," Mrs. Tang insisted. Tang Li was too lazy to pay attention. In any case, he had already made up his mind. Tang Li and his family of 3 ate dinner at Mrs. Tang's place before returning to their own courtyard. Mrs. Tang looked at their backs and finally sighed. She also didn't want Tang Li to take a concubine, but where did Master go? She turned around and asked the servant girl. "It seems he's at Lotus Peak." The servant girl replied. Mrs. Tang didn't send anyone to look for him. She nervously closed the door and waited for the arrival of tomorrow. Tang Li carried little Tang Tang in one hand and held Ning Jing's hand in the other. They passed through the daisies. The path was short, but they felt like they could walk for an eternity. When they returned to the room, Tang Li asked, "Ning Jing, do you know that the Tang clan's women don't marry outside the family?" "I've heard of it. Why?" Ning Jing asked. Historically, the Tang clan's women didn't marry outside the family because the Tang clan would use marriage to restrict the Tang clan's hidden weapon designers. This ensured that those families would remain loyal to the Tang clan and wouldn't leak the blueprints. Tang Yiru was an exception. Tang Yuan's marriage to the East Qin imperial family was also an exception. Other than the first time, none of the Tang clan's women were lucky enough to avoid marriage arrangements. After Tang Li explained, he added, "Tang Tang can't escape this fate either." No, Ning Jing refused immediately. She didn't know much about the Tang clan's women not marrying outside the family, but she understood after hearing Tang Li's explanation today. Although it was said that the Tang clan's women wouldn't marry outside the family and would only marry the master of hidden weapons, it was still the same as looking for a son-in-law. After the marriage, they would have to stay in the Tang clan for the rest of their lives and serve it. Ning Jing abruptly looked at Tang Li and said, "Tang Li, since you're leaving the Tang clan for the rest of your life, why don't you choose your daughter instead? If you're looking for a son-in-law, then why don't you just let your daughter inherit the position of clan head?" Actually, a daughter had the ability to lead a family as well. Hadn't she single-handedly raised up Cloud Realm Trade Consortium in the past? She didn't want to marry back then, but wanted to stay in the consortium and serve the clan for the rest of her life. I can't decide on this matter," Tang Li sighed as he hugged little Tang Tang. "My father and mother are the ones to decide on this matter. How about this? Let's go play my big brother's place for a few years. We'll come back after my parents think things through." In any case, they'll have to think things through carefully. Ning Jing gave a start, but quickly broke into a smile. As it turned out, Tang Li wasn't planning to talk to Tang Zijin at all. He'd long planned to run away from home and threaten him again. "Idiot, hurry up and pack your things. We'll leave tonight. Don't let them find us, or else we won't be able to leave," Tang Li said in a low voice. Chapter 1219. Ning Jing had been hesitant at first, but after hearing Tang Li's explanation, she was determined to be as willful as Tang Li. If they couldn't break the ancestral rule of Tang Sek's daughters not marrying outside, little Tang Tang might even be forced to marry a designer in the future. If that was the case, it was better to let Tang Tang inherit the position of clan leader and recruit the man she liked into the Tang clan. Ning Jing could compromise in the Tang clan, but she wouldn't allow her daughter to suffer. Tang Li wanted to leave in the middle of the night to threaten Tang Zijin. Ning Jing packed her bags and followed her husband's lead. Tang Li left a note for Madame Tang, telling his confidant to give it to her tomorrow. He didn't bring a single servant, only his wife and daughter. He sneaked down the mountain in the middle of the night to escape. Early the next morning, Madame Tang had just woken up when she saw Tang Zijin return. Her face was gloomy and her heart was heavy as she ignored Tang Zijin. She didn't know if Tang Zijin had gone to Lotus Peak to reflect on his mistakes or to vent. He was in a good state today. Seeing his wife's sullen face, he walked over and personally poured tea for her. "I'm here to apologize, madam. It's all my fault. I was muddle-headed." Despicable. Madame Tang exposed Tang Zijin's face with one sentence. He knew she would be angry, but he still lied to her before apologizing. If this wasn't despicable behavior, then what was? Tang Zijin's expression didn't change no matter how much Madame Tang scolded him. Especially in private, Madame Tang could poke him in the nose and he would still smile. "It's my fault, it's my fault." Tang Zijin clung to Madame Tang, trying his best to please her. People who didn't know better would think that this was a loving couple quarreling. In the past, Madame Tang would have let Tang Zijin pester her and punished him. But this time she didn't. She pushed Tang Zijin away and said coolly, "Don't play this game with me. I'm telling you, don't bother forcing Ning Jing." Yesterday, she agreed to let Tang Li take a concubine, but your son refused. Tang Zijin immediately sat down and looked at Madame Tang suspiciously. Mrs. Tang had planned to wait until Tang Li came, but seeing Tang Zijin's face, she was so angry that she decided to say it first. "Tang Zijin, listen carefully. I have something important to tell you." Mrs. Tang became serious. Tang Zijin became more and more suspicious. He knew that Tang Li was very ruthless yesterday. Besides that, what else was there? Could it be that Madame really wanted to divorce him? Yesterday, when they quarreled, Madame said twice that she wanted to divorce him. Seeing his wife's grave expression and stern gaze, Tang Zijin finally became nervous. "Madame," Mrs. Tang interrupted. "Tang Zijin, Ning Jing can't have another child." "What?" Tang Zijin exclaimed. When Ning Jing was locked up in Tiger's prison, in order to protect little Tang Tang, she used an abortion drug. "She fell ill and can never get pregnant again," Mrs. Tang said faintly. "That?" Tang Zijin was very surprised. Tang Zijin, Ning Jing's daughter-in-law, is nowhere to be found. Mrs. Tang sighed. Tang Zijin didn't say anything. He frowned and seemed to be thinking about something. "Tang Zijin, say something. What should we do?" Mrs. Tang probed. "Madam, you just said that Ning Jing agreed to let Tang Li take a concubine?" Tang Zijin asked thoughtfully. Mrs. Tang didn't need to ask to know what Tang Zijin was thinking. Tang Zijin must want Ning Jing to persuade Tang Li to take a concubine. Mrs. Tang chose to remain silent. Tang Zijin's mood improved. Mrs. Tang looked at him and secretly made up her mind. After the new year, she would go to the temple to pray to Buddha and never pay attention to him again. Some people would change in the end. Bailey Yuanlong was like that, and so was Tang Zijin. However, Mrs. Tang firmly believed that some people would never change. Their hearts would never change. "Madam, this is a serious matter. Let Li do as he pleases." "You mustn't." Before Tang Zijin could finish, an attendant rushed in. "Bad news, bad news." The clan head left a letter and left. "What?" Tang Zijin slapped the table and stood up. The attendant hurriedly handed over Tang Li's note. When Tang Zijin saw the two lines, he was so angry that he almost fainted. He fell to the floor and patted his chest. Mrs. Tang took the note and read it. She wasn't angry, but didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She sighed repeatedly. She should have guessed it a long time ago. When Tang Li said yesterday that he wanted to talk to father in person, she should have guessed what that guy was planning. Tang Li only wrote 2 lines on the note. The first line was, "Father, Mother, this child has let down the ancestors of the Tang clan. This child has no face to stay in the Tang clan. This child will leave with Ning Jing and Tang Tang. Once we have a son for the Tang clan, we will return immediately." The second line was, "If father and mother can't wait, you can give this child a younger brother. This child is willing to give up the position of clan head." What was this? This was simply a blatant threat. Ning Jing couldn't give birth to another child. Unless they gave up on having grandson, they wouldn't return. This wasn't just a threat, it was also a jab at Tang Zijin. Actually, at Tang Zijin's age, there were plenty of women who would take concubines and have children. It wasn't easy for Mrs. Tang to get pregnant at her age, but there were plenty of young concubines who could give birth to a son for Tang Zijin. If Tang Zijin really wanted to continue the bloodline of the Tang clan, he could take concubines himself. Tang Li was using this method to tell his father not to do to others what he didn't want done to him. Mrs. Tang could only smile bitterly. "Tang Zijin, I'll leave this matter to you. This is an important matter for your Tang clan. We women have no right to interfere. Since Ali and the others aren't here, there's no need to celebrate the new year. I'll leave this afternoon and go to Shishan Temple to pray for my children and grandchildren. Don't disturb the tranquility of Buddhism." Mrs. Tang waved her hand and went back to her room to pack her luggage. Tang Zijin sat there for a long time without responding. However, when he saw Mrs. Tang come out with her luggage, he immediately panicked. "Madam, let's talk things over. Think about Ali." "I really don't have any ideas," Mrs. Tang said calmly. "Madam," Tang Zijin panicked. "Moo," Mrs. Tang said coldly. Tang Zijin didn't move, but when Mrs. Tang's gaze turned cold, Tang Zijin reluctantly retreated. Just like that, Mrs. Tang left the Tang clan that day with a few servants and went to Shishan Temple. Tang Zijin stood guard at the top of Divine Dragon Peak alone. He didn't send people to look for Tang Li like last time when he ran away from the wedding. He also didn't announce that Tang Li had run away from home. He sat alone at the top of the mountain, deep in thought. Soon, it was New Year's Eve. Although Tang Li and Ning Jing were heading towards Yuning, they didn't rush. Time was too tight. No matter how fast they rushed, they couldn't make it to New Year's Eve with his brother and sister-in-law. They simply slowed down and took it as a vacation. They swam all the way to Yuning Palace. It was about time for Rui Er's first birthday. Rui Er was already the crown prince. There wasn't a big banquet, but his first birthday would definitely be very grand. Not long after Tang Li left the Tang clan, he went to get a map and specifically chose fun, beautiful, and delicious places to visit. He was the coachman, bodyguard, and servant. During the day, he held Ning Jing with one hand and carried Tang Tang with the other. At night, he let Ning Jing sleep in peace. If there was any movement from Tang Tang, he would immediately sit up. Fortunately, Tang Tang was easy to take care of. Other than the few times she needed to pee, she basically slept until dawn. On New Year's Eve, Tang Li spent a lot of money to book a tea house called Tea House No. 7. This tea house was the only one on the road from the Tang clan to Yuning County that was open for business on New Year's Eve. Moreover, it was newly opened. Like other tea houses, there was a tea mountain, a tea workshop, a tea pavilion, and an independent courtyard for guests to stay in. However, unlike other tea houses, Tea House No. 7 combined tea and hot springs. There was a hot spring in each independent courtyard. A special tea was added to the spring water. The hot springs were hot and filled with the fragrance of tea. This was simply an irresistible enjoyment for tea lovers. Tang Li was actually not interested in tea, and he didn't study it. He chose this place purely because it was open for business on New Year's Eve. After all, it was the first time the three of them were celebrating New Year's Eve together. He didn't want to make do with Ning Jing and Tang Tang in the carriage. In order to rush over on New Year's Eve, he didn't sleep for 2 consecutive nights. He drove through the night and finally arrived at Tea House No. 7 in the evening. As soon as Ning Jing lifted the curtain, Tang Li came over to hold Tang Tang. He pulled his cloak and wrapped Tang Tang in his arms, afraid that she would be frozen by the wind and snow. Tea house number 7? That's an interesting name. Is there an 8th or 9th? Ning Jing asked. You're talking too much. There are tea houses from the 1st to the 10th. I heard that the owner behind this tea house has a big background. What's his background? I'm not sure about that. I haven't heard about it before. It should be newly opened, right? It was opened 7 or 8 months ago. You and your daughter go to rest later. I'll personally cook dinner for you. Is there anything you want to eat? I'll think about it later. First, I'll make a bowl of porridge for your daughter. The husband and wife protected Tang Tang as they talked and walked into the tea house. Soon, a tea servant came to receive them and led them along the hand-folding corridor. Tang Li inadvertently turned his head and saw a tall carriage parked in the courtyard not far away. He saw a corner and felt that it was somewhat familiar. Just as he was about to take a closer look, Tang Tang reached out her small hand from his arms and pinched his chin. Tang Li looked down and began to play with his daughter. He didn't pay attention to the carriage anymore. The servant girl brought the family of 3 to a warm room. As soon as they entered the room, a man who looked like a shopkeeper rushed over. Are you Master Tang? The shopkeeper asked politely. Are you the owner of the tea house? What's your surname? Tang Li asked. My surname is Wu. I'm not the owner. I'm just following orders to manage tea house number 7. The shopkeeper replied politely. Shopkeeper Wu, is your boss here? Ning Jing asked. She had been in business for many years and was quite interested in the business of the hot spring tea house. The boss isn't here. The two of you, there's a situation in the tea house. We won't be able to receive you tonight and for the next 3 days. I'll double the compensation for your losses. Could you please do us a favor? Shopkeeper Wu politely gestured for them to leave. Did that mean they had to leave? Chapter 1220. Shopkeeper Wu's meaning was obvious. He wanted to ask Tang Li and the others to leave. Tang Li looked at Shopkeeper Wu's gesture, and his anger rose. In order to let his wife and daughter be at ease and celebrate the new year happily, he spent a lot of effort to find this tea house and rushed over early and late. The snow outside was getting heavier and heavier. They were in the middle of nowhere, so where were they supposed to go to celebrate the new year? Were they supposed to spend it in the carriage? Little Tang Tang could feel her father's anger. She poked her head out from under her father's cloak and stared curiously at Shopkeeper Wu. Her big, watery eyes were filled with confusion and looked especially cute. What if it's not convenient? Tang Li asked coldly. Shopkeeper Wu obviously saw that Tang Li's expression had changed, but he still replied politely. Lord Tang, I'm really sorry. How much compensation do you need? Just name your price. Tang Li snorted. Ning Jing didn't say anything. She took little Tang Tang and sat to the side to wait. It was obvious that they didn't want to leave. Shopkeeper Wu looked troubled when he saw this. Both of you. I'm not the boss, so I can't make the decision. If you don't leave and the higher-ups blame me, I'll have to leave. Both of you, please take it as I'm begging you. This is such a big tea house. What's the situation? Can't you give our family of 3 a courtyard to spend the night? It's the new year and it's snowing outside. We even have to take care of our child. Must you chase us away? Shopkeeper Wu, tell me, is this kind? How can a tea house last long if it's not kind? Ning Jing couldn't help but say. This tea house was so big that it had at least a few dozen courtyards. Tang Li had spent a lot of money to book the entire courtyard. Now that there was a situation, he wouldn't book the entire tea house and just stay in one courtyard. This was already the greatest concession they could make. Tang Li sat down lazily and casually crossed his legs. You can leave if you want. Get your boss to come out and give me a reason that will convince me wholeheartedly. Otherwise, do you believe that this lord will burn down your tea house to make my daughter happy? He didn't know if little Tang Tang understood her father's words, but she leaned into her mother's embrace and giggled in a particularly cooperative manner. Although shopkeeper Wu didn't know about Tang Li's background, he knew that Tang Li's background wasn't small. Otherwise, it would be impossible for Tang Li to reserve the entire manor. After hesitating for a while, he finally told them the truth. The two of you, to tell you the truth. Just an hour ago, Two distinguished guests came to the manor and booked the entire manor. Before he could finish his sentence, Tang Li slammed the table and stood up. I booked it a few days ago. What is the meaning of this? What's wrong? Are we not VIP guests? Today, I want to see what a distinguished guest looks like. Master Tang, calm down, calm down. With a mysterious expression, shopkeeper Wu lowered his voice and said, Lord Tang, I can't afford to offend those two masters, and neither can you. It's not that I don't want to do business with you. It's that I can't do it. Do you understand? Listen to my advice and leave quickly. I'll send someone to clear the way for you, and I guarantee that you'll be sent to the county town properly. As for your losses, I'm willing to pay 3 times the price. Can't afford to offend them? Just because you can't afford to offend them, you don't have to follow the rules? Let me tell you, in this world, other than my brother and sister-in-law, there's no one I can't afford to offend. Lead the way for me, and I'll go meet your 2 distinguished guests and teach them the rules of first come, first served. The more Tang Li thought about it, the more sullen he felt. He actually encountered this kind of thing during the new year. If he didn't vent his anger, how could he survive in the underworld in the future? Shopkeeper Wu's patience finally ran out, and his face darkened. You two, don't refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. As soon as he finished speaking, a hidden dart instantly brushed past Shopkeeper Wu's mouth, drawing a long line of blood. He was so shocked that he was stupefied and didn't understand what was going on. Another hidden dart appeared in Tang Li's hand out of nowhere. He fiddled with it and looked at Shopkeeper Wu with interest. He smiled and said, I'll give you the time it takes to brew a cup of tea. Go and invite your distinguished guests here. Tell them that I'm inviting you to drink a forfeit. Shopkeeper Wu was purely a businessman and didn't know anything about martial arts. He was so scared that he trembled and ran out without saying anything. But he hadn't gone out long before a group of blade-wielding page boys rushed in and surrounded Tang Li's family of 3. You're courting death. Tang Li's hands flashed with hidden weapons. Every hidden weapon was shot out without missing a target. They all hit vital points, but they didn't take lives. After all, he didn't want to kill anyone in front of little Tang Tang. Ning Jing pulled little Tang Tang into her arms and covered her eyes. However, little Tang Tang peeked out from between her mother's fingers. She wasn't afraid at all and instead giggled. Not long after, she pulled down her mother's hand and clapped. Daddy good? Daddy is awesome. Tang Li cleaned up the room of servants in a few moves. He looked at little Tang Tang and said with a smile, Is it fun? Yes, it's fun. Little Tang Tang was excited and her childish voice flowed smoothly. Let's go. Daddy will take you out to play. Tang Li's anger was greatly reduced by his daughter's smile. However, this didn't mean that he would let it go easily. He picked up little Tang Tang and said to Ning Jing, Follow behind me. Let's make our daughter happy. Ning Jing didn't have any objections and followed closely behind him. The husband and wife accompanied little Tang Tang, gesturing to the servants as they walked into the depths of the manor. Along the way, other than the sound of Tang Li's hidden weapons flying, there was only little Tang Tang's giggles. When they were far away, several shadow guards hiding in the shadows emerged. The leader was none other than Su Donglin. Brother Dong, is that Sect Master Tang and Madame Jing? The shadow guard asked timidly. Yes, Sect Master Tang. Doesn't seem to be stupid anymore. Su Donglin muttered to himself. I've never heard Master mention it before. Brother Dong, should we report this to Master? The shadow guard asked again. Looks like it's a coincidence. Hee, it's a surprise for Master. I'll take the blame if they blame me. Don't be afraid. Su Donglin laughed. When Master Tang went out, the shadow guard would naturally accompany them. He brought more than 20 shadow guards with him to stand guard around the manor. He knew as soon as Tang Li and the others approached the tea house. He was just curious about Manager Wu. Sect Master Tang had clearly booked the tea house first. So why didn't he tell the Emperor and Empress the truth when they came over? Brother Dong, did Manager Wu see through Master Tang's identity? The shadow guard asked again. Not really. Master Tang probably offered a higher price than Sect Master Tang. Master Tang stayed for 3 days, and Sect Master Tang stayed for 1 night. Even if he paid 3 times as much, he still made a profit. Su Donglin said seriously. The emperor and empress were traveling incognito, so they didn't reveal their identities. Manager Wu had probably used honored guests to scare Tang Li, but it was probably just an excuse. He didn't really see through Master Tang's identity. Brother Dong, Madame Jing is right. Manager Wu isn't honest when doing business. I wonder who Master Tang is. I don't think he's an honest person either. The shadow guard sighed with emotion. Who cares if he's honest or not? If Master Tang likes this manner, then just buy it. Su Donglin looked indifferent. If Master Tang had strength, then so did the servants. Very soon, Su Donglin was chasing after Tang Li and his family of 3. The manor was very large and filled with page boys. Tang Li and little Tang Tang were having a great time playing around. Currently, Long Fei and Han Yunxi were resting in the deepest part of the estate in the largest and most hidden courtyard. Neither of them had heard the commotion outside. Long Fei didn't like crowds. When he was Tianning's monarch, he'd always hide from the festivities and banquets. Those matters were simply too annoying. For example, the New Year's greetings on the first day of the year. He had to stay in his estate and wait for the officials to come in waves. How could he bear it? Now that he was emperor, it wasn't easy to hide, but he still did. He used the excuse of avoiding the cold to bring little Rua to number 7 tea house for the new year. He told the officials to send someone over if they had any urgent matters, but there was no need for them to come. Actually, he planned to head south to the Plum Blossom Sea, but the journey was too long for him to make it. Now that there were too many matters at court, he couldn't leave for too long. Northernly was still in the midst of disaster relief, so he had to keep an eye on the situation. He was about to give up on going out when he happened to discover this hot spring tea house in the west of Yuning. It would only take 5 to 6 days to reach the place. Moreover, the tea and hot springs were to his liking, so he brought his wife and son here through the wind and snow. Han Yunxi sat on one side, arranging the red packets to be distributed. Things were different now. In the past, she didn't have to worry about red packets. But now that she was the empress and the mother of the nation, according to Cloud Realm's customs, the madams, and young misses of officials had to enter the palace to pay respects to her. Although she was going out, the red packets still had to be sent out from the tea house early in the morning. Otherwise, people would say she was stingy, especially the madams of the officials in the Jiangnan area. Of course, Han Yunxi prepared red packets for little Rui and Tang Tang first. Although Long Fei Yi would give some as well, she was more than happy to add another packet for the children. Little Rui was sitting behind his mother, quietly pulling out banknotes from the red packets and stuffing them all into one. He was almost 1 year old. As expected of the son of Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi, he was already extraordinary in all aspects at such a young age. For example, he was taller than other children his age. Just by looking at his figure, people would believe that he was only 2 years old. His hands and feet were especially nimble. Little Tang Tang had only been able to walk steadily after 1 year and 2 months. However, he could leave right now and even run on his toes. For example, little Tang Tang could only speak single words when he was 1.5 years old. Now that he was almost 2 years old, he could only communicate with his parents smoothly. But he could already speak single words before he was 1 year old. For example, his sensitivity. He could sense even the slightest movement. Long Fei Yi had tested that his sensitivity was no less than that of a martial arts practitioner. For example, his ability to learn. Han Yunxi taught him almost everything that she taught him once, and he could remember it very well. For example, his courage. No matter if he met a stranger, a sudden situation, or a dangerous environment, he was never afraid, let alone cry. But even now, he cried when Long Fei Yi hugged him. He was not close to Long Fei Yi at all. If it weren't for the father and son's similar appearance and temperament, people would probably suspect that this child was not Long Fei Yi's biological son. Of course, no matter how amazing the talent of a child who was not even 1 year old was, he was still immature. Not only did he pull out the banknotes from the red packets, but he also resealed the seals and stacked them one by one. Han Yunxi carefully wrapped the red packets, while Long Fei Yi stood by the window, not far away, looking at the snow and thinking about things. Neither of them noticed what their son had done. Little Rue had probably emptied 10 red packets and put all 10 banknotes into one red packet. That red packet was hidden by him. "What's that sound outside?" Long Fei Yi suddenly asked. Han Yunxi didn't care, but Rue suddenly got up and ran out of the door. Chapter 12:21. As soon as Ray ran out, Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi immediately chased after him. As soon as they stepped out of the door, they heard the giggling of a little girl and the sound of flying concealed weapons. Su Donglin had set up defenses inside and outside the tea house, so there shouldn't have been such a big commotion. "What's going on?" Rue stood in front and seemed to be very interested in the little girl's laughter. Generally speaking, children of this age especially liked playmates of the same age. However, Rue was different. Not only did he not like to play with children of the same age, but he also especially hated playing with girls. Han Yunxi remembered that when little Rue had just learned to walk, a few title madams had brought their granddaughters to the palace. Whether it was a baby girl in swaddling clothes, a baby girl learning to walk like Rue, or an older girl, she'd brought her granddaughters into the palace. Rue didn't like any of them and ignored them. Rue only liked to play with adults. If he wasn't clinging to his mother, he would be clinging to Su Donglin and the others. When he went to Gu Beiyue's place, he would definitely grab one of the little thing's ears and throw it out with all his strength. Then, he would cling to Gu Beiyue and make Gu Beiyue carry him. After standing for a while, ran out of the courtyard and along the corridor on the right. Naturally, Han Yunxi and Long Fei followed along, but they hadn't gone far before they saw Manager were running towards them. Both of his hands had been struck by hidden darts, his face stained with blood. He screamed for help as he ran towards them. Little Rue was so calm. Shopkeeper Wu ran past him, but he didn't even look at him and continued running forward. He seemed to be curious and a little unhappy. His brows were slightly furrowed. At such a young age, there was an innate heroic spirit between his brows. It was obvious at a glance that he had an extraordinary background and was either rich or noble. Long Fei Yi saw the darts in Shopkeeper Wu's hands and became even more curious. However, he didn't continue to chase Rue. Han Yunxi stopped beside him and also sized up Shopkeeper Wu, who was walking towards them. They immediately recognized the darts in Shopkeeper Wu's hands. They were from the Tang sect. No wonder Su Donglin didn't do anything. But why did the Tang sect attack the people in the tea house? Since the people from the Tang sect and the Shadow Guard were here, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi were not worried about Rue. Although the two of them followed, they were not in a hurry. Rue ran very fast and soon arrived at the crime scene. Tang Li had just beaten 3 or 4 servants to the ground. Little Tang Tang clapped her hands and cheered, giggling loudly. Little Tang Tang had a loud voice, and the manor's veranda was very quiet. Little Tang Tang's uninterrupted laughter seemed even louder, and after a long time, it had a kind of indescribable charm. Suddenly, Little Tang Tang's laughter stopped abruptly. Tang Li and Ning Jing were also stunned. They saw a child. The child looked to be about 1.5 years old. His height was almost as tall as Little Tang Tang. He stood in front of the servants on the ground and was basically treating them as air. He was not afraid at all. He put his hands behind his back and looked up at them. His eyes were even more beautiful than Little Tang Tang's. His pupils were as dark as a deep pool, and his eyelashes were especially long and dense. Ignorant and cold eyes, people couldn't help but like it and want to laugh. "This child," Ning Jing blurted out. When they first saw little Ray he was still a baby in swaddling clothes. He only knew how to cry and laugh. Children are 1 year old grew quickly and their faces changed a lot. At this time, little Ray was very different from when they first met him. However, Ning Jing still recognized him at a glance. Tang Li had no memory of the previous time, but he also unconsciously opened his mouth. "You are Xinyuan Rue?" This child was simply too similar to his brother, especially his heroic and imposing appearance. "Rue, why are you here?" Ning Jing was very curious. Little Rui absolutely did not recognize them. At this time, he also completely ignored Tang, Li, and Ning Jing. His eyes fell on little Tang Tang. Little Tang Tang had long noticed this little brother staring at her. She was held by her father and looked down at him from above. Her little face gradually tensed up because she felt that this little brother's gaze was particularly unfriendly. Who is he? What's he doing here? Rui, you're Rui, right? Where are your parents? Ning Jing asked as she walked over. Mother, little Tang Tang shouted, not letting her go. Tang Tang, this is Rui. He is a little brother. Ning Jing quickly explained. Little Rui, just glanced at Ning Jing from the corner of his eyes and still ignored her. Ning Jing's heart was filled with emotion. This little guy was indeed Long Fei Ye's son. This cold and unapproachable look was exactly the same as Long Fei Ye's. At such a young age, he already gave off such an aura. What would happen when he grew up? Ning Jing still walked forward, but as soon as she squatted down, he immediately retreated expressionlessly without a word. Huh? Tang Li put little Tang down and laughed. Can't be wrong. He is definitely my brother's son. My brother was like this when he was young too. Tang Li naturally did not remember how Long Fei Yi looked like when he was around 1 year old, but he remembered that Long Fei Yi was already like this when he was 5 or 6 years old. He avoided people when he saw them, and especially hated being close to them. Later on, when he grew up, he did not avoid people when he saw them because they would consciously stay away from him. Kid, your father was not close to anyone when he was young, but he was close to me. You have to call me uncle. Come, let me hug you. Where are your parents? Let's go find them. Tang Li said as he reached out to hug Rui. He did not give face to Ning Jing, but he did not even give face to Tang Li and continued to retreat. Tang Li did not give up and took another step forward. Just as he was about to coax him, little Tang Tang suddenly screamed. Mother can hug other people, but father can't. Daddy belonged to her alone. Rui's brows immediately furrowed again when little Tang Tang screamed. He suddenly avoided Tang Li's hand and ran past him, going straight to little Tang Tang. Little Tang Tang did not expect this and was about to dodge when little Rui ran into her and knocked her down. This time, little Tang Tang screamed even louder. Rui pressed on top of her, crumpled a handkerchief into a ball, and stuffed it into her mouth to block her mouth. Ning Jing and Tang Li were dumbfounded and did not recover for a while. Rui's movements earlier looked nimble, but now he was practically pouncing on little Tang Tang. He struggled for a while and got up from little Tang Tang. He clapped his hands with a serious expression and said in a childish voice, "Noisy." Ning Jing and Tang Li both recovered. Tang Li quickly carried his daughter and tore off the handkerchief. He first checked her head, then other places, and asked anxiously, "Where does it hurt? Tell father, where does it hurt? Does it hurt here? Does your head hurt here?" Little Tang Tang did not make a sound. She pursed her lips tightly and looked at little Rui. "Daughter, say something. Where does it hurt?" Tang Li was anxious. Ning Jing frowned at her daughter's expression and did not make a sound. Although Ning Jing doted on her daughter, she did not spoil her as much as Tang Li. Usually, when little Tang Tang fell, Ning Jing would make her stand up on her own. Even if it hurt, she would make sure she stood up first before she carried her. However, Tang Li was different. Whenever little Tang Tang fell, he would immediately carry her. Even if she was not hurt, his heart would ache for a long time. However, after waiting for a while, little Tang Tang did not cry or make a sound. Ning Jing panicked. This little girl was not usually so timid. Why was she not talking? "Tang Tang, where does it hurt? Say something," Ning Jing said. Rui stood at the side and stared at little Tang Tang. His young face was full of seriousness. He hated noise the most. "No, it doesn't hurt. No," little Tang Tang said with great difficulty. Finally, she could not take it anymore. She closed her eyes and clenched her fists tightly. Using all her strength, she screamed. Her delicate little face crumbled. He covered his ears with both hands, turned around, and ran away like a wisp of smoke. Too scary. He did not run far before he bumped into his mother, who was walking towards him. "What's wrong?" Han Yunqi picked up Rui. He lay on her shoulder and still covered his ears. He pursed his lips tightly. His expression was fierce, but also somewhat pitiful. Long Fei looked at him from the corner of his eyes. After a while, he said coldly, "All right, don't tire your mother out. Come down." Seeing that Rui did not understand, Long Fei pursed his lips and changed his words. "If you don't come down, Imperial Father will carry you." These words were very effective. It was a tried and tested tactic. Immediately slid down from his mother and stood obediently at the side. Long Fei still did not know why his son did not want him to carry him, but it did not seem to be a bad thing. At least, when the two of them could not discipline the little guy, he only had to say the word carry and would immediately be as obedient as a little rabbit. "Baby Rui, why are you running? Who did you meet?" Han Yunqi was very sensitive as a mother, and since that Rui was afraid. She and Long Fei had been busy for several months and finally had a few days of free time. Once they relaxed, they were lazy and would not even bother to lift the sky if it fell. Normally, she and Long Fei would have chased after them to see what was going on. Long Fei had already walked forward. Han Yunqi held Rui's hand and was about to follow. He saw a little girl about 2 years old dashing towards him. Her running speed was like a gust of wind, extremely fast. This girl was none other than Little Tang Tang. Following closely behind Little Tang Tang were 2 other people, Tang Li and Ning Jing. Long Fei stopped abruptly. Ning Jing and Tang Li ran even faster when they saw Long Fei from afar. Especially Tang Li. He directly overtook Little Tang Tang and ran in front of Long Fei, almost knocking him down. Han Yunqi and Long Fei were very surprised. Although they knew that the people from the Tang sect were coming, they did not expect it to be Tang Li and Ning Jing. Long Fei took a step back and frowned at Tang Li. However, Tang Li laughed foolishly. "Brother, sister-in-law." Chapter 12:22. Long Fei and Han Yunqi's hearts almost stopped beating at Tang Li's greeting of brother and sister-in-law. Tang Li recognized them. Long Fei pressed down on Tang Li's shoulders, surprised and pleasantly surprised. He looked at Tang Li, unable to speak for a long time. The one he missed the most was his younger brother after all. The one he regretted the most was his younger brother after all. Han Yunqi strode over. She looked at Ning Jing and then at Tang Li. Like Long Fei, she was so surprised that she didn't know what to say. The surprise that Tang Li brought to them on New Year's Eve was too big. He's awake, and he can recognize everyone. It's just that he lost all his memories of the days when he was in a daze. Ning Jing explained. When did this happen? Why are you guys here?" Han Yunqi quickly asked. "This is a long story." Ning Jing walked over and bowed respectfully. Ning Jing greets Her Majesty the Empress. Han Yunqi quickly went to help her up. "There are no outsiders here. What are you doing?" Ning Jing followed etiquette, but Tang Li didn't care so much. No matter where Long Fei sat, he was still his dearest older brother. "It's good that you're awake." Long Fei's tone was calm, but he put his arm around Tang Li's shoulders and hugged him tightly. This brotherly affection was better than words. Han Yunqi was filled with emotion. "Long Fei, this year is finally perfect, right?" On the last night of the year, a sober Tang Li stood in front of them. This year, what was there to regret? Long Fei let go of Tang Li and asked, "Why? Did you run away again?" "It's a long story. Come, let's talk inside." "Brother, this is a joke, an absolute joke. My father is getting more and more muddle-headed as he gets older." Tang Li laughed heartily. Long Fei knew him the best. If he wasn't at the Tang sect at this time, he must have had a falling out with the 2 elders and left home. "Turn right up ahead, there's a tea house." Long Fei was very curious. Now that Tang Li was awake, shouldn't Tang Zijin be thanking the heavens? What else could he have done to make Tang Li run away with his wife and daughter during the New Year? Did that old man really not want his son anymore? At this moment, Ning Jing exclaimed, "Where's little Tang Tang?" Han Yunqi looked back and found that her Rui Bao was gone. When they were talking, the 2 children were clearly at the side. Tang Li and Long Fei Yi were both walking forward. As soon as he heard Ning Jing's words, he immediately looked back. Sure enough, his precious daughter was gone. Where is he? Tang Li panicked. Daughter, daughter. Han Yunqi couldn't help but roll her eyes. Did Tang Li have to be so dramatic? Why was he so anxious? She wouldn't get lost here. Ning Jing was already used to Tang Li's fussing. Since the Tang sect, he had spoiled his daughter to the heavens. Long Fei Yi raised his eyebrows and looked at Tang Li without saying anything. Su Donglin, who had been hiding at the side, finally showed up. He said with a smile, Sect Master Tang. Miss and the Crown Prince went to the back. Without a word, Tang Li chased after her, leaving Ning Jing with no choice but to follow. Han Yunqi was about to chase after them when she saw that Long Fei Yi didn't move. She asked, shall we go and take a look? Because of little Rui Er's rejection, Long Fei Yi was too lazy to take the initiative to please the little guy. As for other people's children, even if it was Tang Li's daughter, he wasn't interested in them. I'll go make tea first. Let Su Donglin look after the two children. Don't come over and make a fuss. Long Fei Yi said and left. He was afraid of noise, especially when he was drinking tea and talking about things. He was most afraid of children making noise. In the past few months, he didn't know how many times he wanted to sit down with Han Yunqi to drink tea quietly and talk about things. However, little Rui would grab Han Yunqi's hand and make a fuss for Han Yunqi to play with him. If he wasn't his biological son, he would have kicked him away long ago. Little Rui's behavior was simply snatching Han Yunqi away from him. Han Yunqi knew Long Fei Yi's temper. She didn't say much and chased after Tang Li and the rest. She was curious as to why her son would kidnap little Tang Tang. However, when Han Yunqi caught up with them, she found that she was very wrong. It wasn't little Rui who kidnapped little Tang Tang. It was little Tang Tang who forced little Rui away. The two children were in the corridor on the west side, one in front and one behind. They were only 5 or 6 steps away from each other. The two looked at each other, and their young faces were full of seriousness. To be exact, they were fierce, as if they had seen their enemy. However, little Rui's aura was clearly weaker. Little Tang Tang took a step forward, and little Rui immediately took a step back. Little Tang Tang pouted and took another step forward. Little Rui frowned and looked fierce. Unfortunately, he still took a step back. Just like that, little Tang Tang walked forward step by step, and little Rui retreated step by step. Just now, they had silently made their way to this side, one advancing and one retreating. Su Donglin hid in the dark and witnessed the whole process. He almost laughed himself to death. He didn't expect that their bold crown prince, who dared to snatch the emperor's woman, would actually be afraid of little Tang Tang. At this moment, he was forced into a corner with no way out. Tang Li and Ning Jing were overjoyed, but Han Yunqi was dumbfounded. Was this child her domineering baby Rui? Ah, where's my brother? Where's my brother? Tang Li was extremely proud and smug. Su Donglin, go and find my brother. Let him come over and take a look. Ha ha ha. Let my daughter protect the crown prince in the future. What else could Han Yunqi say other than staying silent? She looked helplessly at little Rui who was forced into a corner. She thought to herself that if the child's father saw this scene, he would probably beat him up. Suddenly, little Tang Tang walked forward again, unable to retreat. Little Rui pushed little Tang Tang away and hurriedly walked out from the corner, staring at little Tang Tang warily. Brat, a gentleman uses his mouth, not his fists. This is the second time. Tang Li was about to help his daughter up when little Tang nimbly got up on her own and glared at little Rui, who refused to be outdone and glared at her cold. Little Tang suddenly took a step forward, and little Rui was very sensitive and retreated at almost the same time. Little Tang put her hands on her hips and looked down on little Rui like a big sister. Rui put his hands behind his back and looked down at little Tang with an invincible posture. Han Yunqi was comforting him when little Tang suddenly screamed. In an instant, little Rui's cold expression collapsed on his young face, and he turned to run. Little Tang Tang screamed and chased after him. Not long after, the two children disappeared into the corridor. Han Yunxi finally understood what was going on. Little Tang Tang's scream was simply a trump card. Little Rue wasn't afraid of anything but noise. Little Tang Tang actually knew his weakness when they met this time. Han Yunxi finally laughed out loud. Tang Li was the happiest and also the first to give chase. Just like that, Little Tang Tang screamed and chased after Little Rue. Little Rue wasn't afraid but annoyed. He ran very, very fast. The adults were also retreating and could easily catch up, but they all kept a certain distance. Everyone wanted to know who would win in the end. Long Fei Yi was completely unaware of all this. He waited in the tea room and finally got impatient and asked the shadow guard to rush them. The shadow guard made a trip and came back to report. Master, Her Majesty said that the two children are causing a ruckus and wants you to go take a look. Long Fei Yi didn't say anything and just waved his hand to dismiss the shadow guard. He smelled the freshly brewed tea and was incomparably relaxed. The entire tea house was covered in snow, and the cold air was especially clean and fresh. At this time, the wind and snow had stopped and the whole world was quiet. Long Fei Yi liked to brew tea in snowy weather. In this climate, a cup of hot tea could wash away the fatigue and dust. His heart could calm down. Being in a high position, the most important thing was to have a calm heart. Only with a calm heart could one see through the world under their feet and the people and things in their hands. Unfortunately, the tea trees in the tea house were all covered in snow. If there were winter plum blossoms to decorate this white world, Long Fei Yi would probably stay for a few more days. The person who opened this tea house must be someone who knew tea. To be able to open several tea houses in such a short time and come up with a hot spring treatment method, it shouldn't be simple. Regardless of their status, Long Fei was still interested in the owner of a tea house who shared similar interests. Of course, he was more interested in this tea house. Looking at the progress of the project in the imperial capital, he and Han Yunxi would have to stay in Yunning for 2 or 3 years. This tea house was so close to Yunning that it would be a good place for them to pass the time. Long Fei already had the idea of buying this tea house and planting plum trees. Thinking of this, he thought of shopkeeper Wu, just as he was about to ask Su Donglin, who knew that a child's scream would come from afar. Long Fei followed the sound and saw that it was getting louder and louder. He saw little Rue running across the veranda opposite the tea house with little Tang Tang behind him, shouting and chasing. Long Fei didn't understand at first, but after looking carefully for a while, he immediately understood. His son was actually being chased by a little girl, Xianyuan Rue. Long Fei got up and flew over. With a flip, he quietly landed in front of little Rue. As soon as she saw Long Fei's cold face, little Tang Tang stopped abruptly and shut her mouth in shock. Little Rue covered his ears with both hands and rushed forward. Bang! Little Rue crashed into Long Fei's leg. Fortunately, he was agile and caught Long Fei's robe in time. Otherwise, he would have bounced off. Little Rue looked up and saw his tall and proud father, like a majestic god, standing in front of him and looking down at him. His father's cold face was particularly scary. Ah! Little Rue, who had been silent until now, finally screamed. He immediately let go and turned to run. He had already run past little Tang Tang, but then he turned back and grabbed little Tang Tang's arm to escape with her. The most terrifying person in the world was his father. When he got angry, it was no joke. Han Yunxi and Tang Li's group weren't far behind. When the two children saw them, they let go of each other's hands. Little Tang Tang threw herself into Tang Li's arms and began to sob. She was really scared. That uncle who just appeared out of thin air was so scary. Little Rue threw himself into his mother's arms and quietly rested on her shoulder. He glanced at the crying little Tang Tang and quickly covered his ears again. Like a little adult, he let out a heavy sigh. Chapter 1223. Long Fei walked over to Han Yunxi and the rest. Seeing little Tang Tang crying, he frowned and asked coldly, "What happened just now?" He hated it when children cried, except for his own. After grew up, other than crying when he was carried, he basically didn't cry at all. He hadn't heard a child cry in a long time. As soon as Long Fei Yi spoke, little Tang Tang snuggled into her father's arms and cried softly. She was scared to death, but she couldn't help sneaking glances at her uncle. Just a glance, and she immediately hid again. The child was just playing. Pushed Tang Tang down and even stuffed a handkerchief in her mouth to make a fuss. Han Yunxi explained with a smile. Tang Li had already complained to her on the way here. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. What was right or wrong in this kind of thing? The two children were still so young and didn't know what was right or wrong. She and Ning Jing just treated it as a joke as Tang Li complained seriously. Hearing this, Long Fei's cold eyes flashed with a trace of amusement, but it disappeared as quickly as it came. He looked at his son and said sarcastically, "Then why are you running? You already have the ability to push people. Are you afraid of being beaten?" Han Yunxi and Ning Jing could tell that Long Fei Yi was mocking his son. Little Rui looked at his father innocently and didn't say a word. Tang Tang won't hit anyone. The little girl is very smart. She chased after Rui and shouted to make a fuss. Han Yunxi laughed. Rui's cute eyes were filled with resentment. It was bad enough that his mother wasn't protecting him, but she was praising others. But despite his resentment, little Rui still hugged his mother's neck tightly and refused to let go. Seeing this, Long Fei Yi couldn't help laughing. He rubbed Rui's little head and said sternly, "Don't push people next time." Unexpectedly, Tang Li became cocky. He chuckled and said, "A gentleman uses his mouth, not his fists. Brother, look, it's still more sensible to have a daughter." Little Tang only used her mouth, but Rui really did it. Tang Li's words hit the nail on the head. He burst out laughing. Long Fei Yi wanted to shut Tang Li up when Rui suddenly said, "Make way." Rui didn't quite understand what the adults were talking about, but he could roughly guess what they meant. He was too lazy to talk at first, but when he saw that his noisy uncle, Tang Li, kept talking nonstop, he knew that his father was annoyed. If he didn't clear his name, who knew if Imperial Father would find him to settle the score? There was only one way for Imperial Father to find him, and that was to throw him to Granny Zhao and not let him sleep with Imperial Mother. Before anyone understood what Ruer meant by make way, Long Fei Yi looked satisfied. He said to Tang Li, "Our son is sensible and knows to give way to a girl." In other words, if Ruer didn't give way to little Tang Tang, would she have chased him to this extent? She might have chased him out long ago. If it was in the past, Tang Li wouldn't dare to argue with his brother. But it was different now. He had a precious daughter. No matter what, he couldn't let his precious daughter be taken advantage of. He immediately retorted, "A daughter is more sensible than a son." She was just teasing her brother and didn't take it seriously. In other words, if little Tang Tang was serious, she wouldn't have chased him in such a big circle. She would have caught up and shouted at little Rui's ear. Tang Li was a child slave and was especially protective. Long Fei Yi was strict with Rui on the surface and didn't spoil him at all, but in fact he loved him dearly. How could he not be protective? Thus, the two brothers took turns to defend their child. Han Yunxi and Ning Jing looked at each other and smiled, tacitly remaining silent. Although little Tang Tang buried her head in her father's arms, she was listening attentively to the conversation between her father and her eldest uncle. She could basically understand the literal meaning of the conversation, but she didn't understand the hidden meaning. Therefore, she was especially confused. She didn't understand why these two adults had to argue for so long over the same meaning. As for little Rui, he couldn't even understand the literal meaning. He leaned on his mother's shoulder and tilted his head to look at his father with a confused expression. He realized that his father was a lot more talkative today. Although he didn't like talkative people, his father was definitely an exception. His father was much more amiable when he was talkative. Long Fei Yi and Tang Li argued until the end. Long Fei Yi said, "As an older sister, you naturally have to be sensible." In other words, little Rui was the younger brother, and it was already very nice of him to give in. This time, Tang Li was immediately speechless. Little Tang Tang was the older sister, and no matter how much she argued with little it would be wrong. After all, little was still young, about a year younger than little Tang Tang. Tang Li looked unwilling. Long Fei Yi turned to Ray and said, "In the future, you still have to give in to your older sister and take care of her, okay?" In the end, Tang Li was defeated. Little Tang Tang had stopped crying, but he lifted her up high to play with her. Come, come, come. Give your imperial uncle a smile. My daughter's smile is so sweet." As soon as little Tang Tang was lifted up, she immediately giggled again. Little Ruer had already covered his ears and lazily laid on his mother's shoulder. He didn't want to play such a childish game. At this moment, Tang Li suddenly tossed little Tang Tang high into the air. Han Yunqi was shocked. Little Ruer also hurriedly got up and looked in disbelief. Little Tang wasn't afraid and even laughed even louder. This game seemed very exciting. Little Ruer looked and unknowingly put his thumb into his mouth and sucked on it with relish. That pair of big, innocent eyes also blinked. Others didn't know, but Han Yunqi and Long Fei Yi were very clear about this little guy's habits. Whenever he saw someone or something that moved him, he would suck on his thumb. He was very proud and wouldn't take the initiative to ask, but his thoughts were written all over his face and actions. Han Yunqi didn't dare to bring her son to play such a dangerous game. She would cry herself to death if she didn't catch him after being thrown so high. In fact, Long Fei Yi wanted to play more than Ruer, but he endured it. If Ruer cried as soon as he caught him, it would be too embarrassing if Tang Li and the others misunderstood that Ruer cried because he was scared by being thrown up high. In the end, Long Fei Yi turned back to the tea room with an expressionless face. Seeing that his imperial father had also left, Ruer looked pitifully at his imperial mother, clearly wanting her to play with him. Little Ruer's eyes were very similar to Long Fei Yi's, but there was a naivety and pitifulness in them that Long Fei Yi never had. Han Yunqi had no way to resist such eyes and stares. She and Long Fei Yi couldn't figure out why Ruer was afraid of Long Fei Yi. They usually got along well, but it wasn't exactly rejection. He just didn't want to be hugged. Han Yunqi thought that it was rare for Ruer to find a game he liked. Perhaps this would be an opportunity. She quickly carried Ruer to the tea room and whispered patiently, "Imperial father will play with you, okay?" Long Fei Yi understood Han Yunqi's intention, and his attitude became gentler. He leaned closer and smiled at Ruer. "Son, Daddy will play with you, okay?" The two words Daddy were closer than the two words Imperial Father. Ruer looked at him and didn't say anything for a long time. Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi waited patiently, while little Tang Tang played happily on the side. Her laughter filled the corridor. Ruer seemed to be in deep thought for a long time before shaking his head. He walked to the side and sat down with his arms crossed in a dignified manner. Han Yunqi and Long Fei Yi were both annoyed and amused. They couldn't do anything about the little guy. For this matter, Granny Zhao had prayed to the gods and Buddha many times. She had even asked many fortune tellers, but to no avail. In fact, it was better to ask Ruer. It was a pity that Ruer couldn't explain why he didn't want to be hugged by his father. Han Yunqi and Long Fei Yi could only wait until Ruer was a little older and could express himself more accurately. Only then would they know the reason. "Kid, whenever you want Daddy to hug you, come over anytime." Long Fei Yi had said this countless times, but Ruer just stared at him and didn't say anything. Soon, Tang Li and Ning Jing came over. Everyone said that daughters were their father's lovers in their previous lives, but Tang Li was treating his daughter as his little lover in this life. Even now, he was holding little Tang Tang in his arms. Even when they sat down to drink tea, he had his daughter sit on his lap. Not to mention Han Yunqi, even Ning Jing didn't have the chance to hug her. Tang Li held the tea and asked softly, "Daughter, do you want some?" Little Tang nodded obediently. Tang Li became serious. "Here, just one sip. Children can't drink tea." "Yes, just one sip." The lively little Tang was tired from playing and was as obedient as a little rabbit in her father's arms. She was very likable. Han Yunqi's heart melted. At this moment, she really wanted to have a daughter. As for Long Fei Yi, he raised his eyebrows and looked at Tang Li several times. Although he didn't say a word, his eyes more or less betrayed his heart. Tang Li carefully fed little Tang Tang a cup of tea and asked happily, "Is it good?" Little Tang Tang stuck out her tongue and shook her head. This was the first time someone complained that Long Fei Yi's tea didn't taste good. After all, the tea prepared by Number 7 Tea House was already very top-notch, but Long Fei Yi didn't like it and brought his own tea to brew. In the past, if someone dared to complain about Long Fei Yi's tea, Tang Li would be the first to stand up and laugh at them for not knowing what was good. However, the present was different from the past. Tang Li, who had a daughter, had completely abandoned his brother. He said, "Don't drink it if it doesn't taste good. Are you hungry?" Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi didn't argue, but Ning Jing's face darkened. "We just ate 2 hours ago. How can we be hungry? Go play somewhere else. The adults want to talk." Tang Li was really too much. Although they were close, he couldn't just leave Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi aside like this. Tang Li realized that he was too engrossed this time. He scratched the back of his head and smiled awkwardly. He put little Tang Tang down and didn't forget to say, "Daughter, you have to tell me if you're hungry." Long Fei Yi looked at little Tang Tang and then at little Ray who was sitting at the side and watching the snow. His gaze was really complicated. The two children played at the side, and the adults could finally sit down to drink tea and talk. Ning Jing was quiet. Tang Li, the talkative guy, almost unreservedly told them about the stupid things his father did. That's right. He ran away from home to complain. Chapter 1224. The tea house was very quiet. Ning Jing hung her head as Tang Li complained in full detail. Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi watched quietly. Although their expressions shifted, they didn't interrupt Tang Li. Little Tang Tang ran off to make a snowman. Little Ray glanced at her before returning his attention to Tang Li. He listened intently, his expression the same as his father's. As for how much he understood, only he knew. When Tang Li finished, Han Yunxi slapped the table. "Ridiculous! Too ridiculous!" Long Fei Yi said, "Tang Li, does her father count as deceiving the sovereign?" Long Fei Yi hadn't received any reports from Cloud Realm Trade Consortium, but Tang Zijin dared to use his name to fabricate false rumors. If Ning Jing wasn't an understanding person, heaven knows what would happen if the news reached the Ning clan's ears. It does. It's the same as a false imperial decree, a serious crime. Tang Li huffed. Long Fei Yi gave a cold snort. "You can keep it. When he comes looking for you, Zhen will settle the score with him." Tang Li was waiting for Long Fei Yi to say those exact words. He would definitely send someone to spread Long Fei Yi's words back to the Tang clan, so that Tang Zijin would hear them. Now it wasn't him, the son, who was threatening Tang Zijin, but Long Fei, the emperor himself. Tang Zijin only had two choices if he wanted him to go back. One, he could stop forcing him to take concubines and go back willingly. Two, he could find Yuning and confess to his crime of deceiving the sovereign before discussing other matters later. Thrilled, he chuckled and said, "Big bro, as long as you take us in, I'm willing to work like an ox or a horse." Long Fei rolled his eyes and said coldly, "I'm not lacking." Ning Jing was also filled with gratitude. She explained, "Your Majesty, I acted on my own and used second-hand weapons. It was inappropriate. I hope the Tang clan was in charge of this matter in the first place. I only need to find cheap and easy-to-use weapons." Han Yunxi said seriously, "Buying back second-hand weapons is an excellent idea. I'll have to reward the Tang sect during the Four Armies Conference after spring." Ning Jing naturally understood Han Yunxi's good intentions. She swore to herself that she would take good care of Cloud Realm's weapons no matter what. She would never allow anything like this to feather her own pockets. As they chatted, the sky turned dark. Su Donglin had already cleared out all the servants and coachmen in the tea house and replaced them with the servants they brought from Yuning. A palace maid came over to light the lamps and whispered in Han Yunxi's ear, "Your Majesty, Zhao Mama is almost done with the preparations. The banquet can begin in a while." On New Year's Eve, Han Yunshi had originally wanted Zhao Mama to prepare a family banquet so that the family of 3 could eat quietly and watch the fireworks. Now that Tang Li and the others were here, the banquet was still a family banquet, but it had to be livelier. On the way here, Han Yunshi had already given orders. Even little Tang Tang's rice had to be prepared separately. You're all hungry, right? Let's go to Heavenly Fragrance Pavilion and try Zhao Mama's cooking, Han Yunshi said teasingly. However, Su Donglin came over at this time. Master, I've investigated everything. The one surnamed Wu doesn't know Master and Your Majesty's identities, but Master offered a price several times higher than the Tang Sect Masters, so he went back on his word and wanted to chase the Tang Sect Master away. Moreover, this tea house wasn't supposed to accept guests. It was the one surnamed Wu who wanted to stay here for the new year and make a profit of his own accord. That manager Wu was greedy for money and afraid of death, so he didn't need Su Donglin to interrogate him personally. His subordinates only needed to ask him a few questions before he confessed everything. As expected of an honored guest, Tang Li muttered to himself. He'd already offered a very high price, but who knew he'd run into a true money bag? Long Fei Yi had no interest in Manager Wu. Coldly, he asked, "What kind of divine being is his master?" "I did, but he doesn't know the origins of the owner. He said he's a handsome man who knows a lot about the Tao of tea. Many of the tea trees in the tea house were personally planted by the owner himself." If this was a few years ago, Long Fei Yi would have a good understanding of the Tao of tea in Cloud Realm Continent. But after so many years of hard work, he had no idea how many newcomers had joined the tea house. Name and residence? Long Fei Yi asked next. Su Donglin shrugged his shoulders. That one surnamed Wu doesn't know either. He said the owner invited him to take care of the tea house for a few months. Once spring comes, the owner will return. Han Yunshi interjected. Tea houses 1 to 10 don't accept guests. No, only tea house 7 doesn't accept guests. Supposedly, this tea house is the most secluded of all. The tea leaves here are the highest quality of all the tea houses, Su Donglin explained. Long Fei Yi hadn't finished touring the entire tea house, but he'd seen plenty of tea trees along the way. Indeed, they were the highest quality. Could it be that he's going to live here by himself? Han Yunshi wondered, as if suspecting something. Go investigate clearly and find the owner. Just say Jin wants to buy this tea house and have him name a price, Long Fei Yi instructed. Tang Li immediately expressed his stance. Brother, I'll stay here and help you take care of the tea house. I won't go back to Yuning with you. Long Fei Yi replied with 4 words, we don't accept guests. The reason why he'd spent so much money to reserve the entire tea house was because he didn't want anyone to disturb him. If it hadn't been his younger brother who'd come recently, he would have chased him away long ago. He'd bought this tea house to give to Han Yunshi to make up for the regret of not being able to accompany her to Jiangnan's Plum Blossom Sea for the new year. This tea house was the same as Jiangnan's Plum Blossom Sea. No guest would stay here in the future. Tang Li was incomparably resentful. He secretly thought about how he'd figure out the Tang sect's finances one day and find a reason to spend a sum of money to buy a tea house. Now that he had a family and privacy, leaving home to live under someone else's roof wasn't a solution. Tang Zijin was celebrating the new year alone on Crouching Dragon Peak. If he knew his son's thoughts, what would he think? Han Yunshi stood up and looked around. The more she looked, the more she liked this tea house. If Long Fei Yi bought it, then she'd be able to live in a corner in the future. If Long Fei was busy, then so be it. In any case, there was nothing to do in the imperial harem, much less any concubines for her to worry about. Moreover, as the head of the military, there wasn't much to worry about right now, so she had plenty of free time. From time to time, she'd bring Rei here to stay for a few days to learn the way of tea and plant tea trees. Han Yunshi picked Rei up and asked, Son, do you like it here? Rui nodded. As a man of few words, he wouldn't say a word if he didn't have to. Let's have Imperial Father buy it and get it to Mother, okay? Han Yunshi asked again. Rui shook his head in disagreement. Han Yunshi was amused. Everyone else didn't understand, but she understood very well. She asked again, Then give it to Ruer, okay? This time, Ruer finally opened his golden mouth and answered without hesitation. Okay. Everyone was amused. Long Fei couldn't help but laugh, but he still didn't agree. He said, "You're not allowed to fight with your mother." Tang Li and Ning Jing were very surprised. They'd never seen a father like Long Fei. Han Yunqi was long used to it, and so was Ruer. He glanced at his imperial father and turned away, ignoring him. When Ruer was a little older, he'd probably say petty. When he was a little older, he'd probably say don't care. As for what he was thinking now, no one knew. Little Tang Tang ran over from the snow and hugged her daddy's thigh. She said in a childish voice, "Daddy, bow bow, hug." Tang Li immediately carried little Tang Tang up and kissed her forehead. He immediately rubbed her hands to keep her warm. Long Fei looked at them deeply and was the first to walk out of the tea house. Heavenly Fragrance Pavilion was the tallest pavilion in the tea house. It was on the east side of the tea house, and there was a lake beside the pavilion. At this time, the lake was already frozen and could be stepped on. The dinner was set in the spacious hall on the second floor of the pavilion. When Han Yunqi and the rest arrived, the large round table was already filled with delicious wine and delicacies. Long Fei and Han Yunqi sat at the head of the table. Little Ruer sat beside Han Yunqi, and Granny Zhao stood at the side to wait on them. Tang Li and Ning Jing sat at the side. Little Tang Tang didn't want to sit alone and insisted on being carried by Tang Li. Ning Jing tried to stop her again and again, but little Tang Tang didn't cry or make a fuss. She just looked at her daddy pitifully. Tang Li's heart immediately softened, and he still carried little Tang Tang to sit on his lap. Long Fei looked at Tang Li deeply again, but unfortunately, Tang Li didn't notice. Seeing this, little Ray, who always liked to sit by himself, suddenly wanted a hug too. He stood up and took a step forward on his mother's body. "Oh, little master, be careful not to fall." Granny Zhao hurriedly supported him. Little Ruer looked at his mother with a pitiful expression. Mother hug. In fact, little Ruer wasn't a clingy child. Usually, he would stick to her when he was wronged or when he was sleeping. Otherwise, he would basically play by himself. On the other hand, Han Yunqi would sometimes stick to her son and want to hug and kiss him. Okay, hug." Han Yunqi also let little Ruer sit on her lap. "Let's start the dinner," Long Fei said faintly. Granny Zhao hurriedly opened the bowl of chicken soup in the center. No chicken, no banquet. Yin Continent's New Year's custom was to have a bowl of chicken soup for dinner overnight. Ever since little Ray was born, Granny Zhao could be said to have been cooking from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. On the last day, she still made a pot of old hen soup. Granny Zhao first served a bowl to Long Fei. Long Fei felt a little nauseous when he saw it. Yes, this year in the military camp, the old hen soup in the imperial study was no less than what Han Yunqi drank. Long Fei pushed the bowl of chicken soup to Tang Li. "Here." Now, he would no longer ask Granny Zhao to make chicken soup for Han Yunqi. Tang Li was about to decline when Long Fei said, "We're eating as a family, so there's no need for those rules. Let's eat." Thus, Han Yunqi also pushed her bowl of chicken soup to Ning Jing. Tang Li and Ning Jing, who were unaware of the situation, drank with relish. Granny Zhao was overjoyed when she saw this, thinking that Master Li would be staying for a while this time. She had raised more than 100 hens, and finally, there was a market. If it wasn't for tonight's family dinner, she wouldn't dare to make chicken soup again, because old hen soup had been personally listed as a forbidden product in the palace by His Highness. After drinking the chicken soup, the real banquet began. The palace maids came to pour wine one after another. It was also during the New Year's Eve family dinner that Long Fei made an exception to drink wine. Ning Jing, we spent New Year's Eve at Three-Way Black Market a few years ago. Gu got me drunk, and my brother took revenge for me by getting Gu drunk until he was unconscious for a few days. Although Gu was drunk at that time, he was only unconscious for a few days. Tang Li was obviously exaggerating. Really, Ning Jing didn't quite believe it. Suddenly, someone sneered, "It's fake." Everyone was shocked. They looked at each other and shook their heads blankly. Who was the one who said that? Chapter 1225. Who was the one who answered Tang Li just now? That sarcastic voice sounded a little familiar. While everyone was still a loss, Long Fei had long raised his head to look at the roof beam. He saw a tall and slim man dressed in fiery red robes, his features enough to topple cities. He was lying lazily on the beam, his head cocked to one side as he watched them with interest. Who else could this person be but Gu? Everyone looked up and was surprised to see Gu Qixiao. This guy was actually here. Gu, you're the Manor Lord, right? Han Yunxi was the most surprised. She was somewhat suspicious when Su Donglin mentioned the Manor Lord. She originally wanted to investigate after the new year, but she didn't expect Gu to appear. Gu's smile didn't change at all. It was still as bright as the stars. He fluttered his luxurious red robe and slowly descended. He was so beautiful that he looked like a red lotus flower that was slowly blooming. He chuckled and said, "Poison girl, Chi brother missed you." Before he could finish, Long Fei Yi threw the wine cup in his hand at him. It was so fast and powerful that it was shocking. Gu Qixiao had narrowly avoided being hit, a thrilling sight to the onlookers. However, once Gu dodged, his smile became even more wanton. He landed beside Han Yunxi and suddenly picked up from her arms. He was so fast that Han Yunxi couldn't avoid him. Rui was slow to react. Gu carried Rui and looked left and right. He pinched Rui's nose and ears. The more he looked, the happier he became. He laughed loudly. "Long Fei Yi, I missed you too." Would Gu miss Long Fei Yi? How could that be? Gu Qixiao said, "Long Fei, this old man misses your son too." At this time, he finally recovered from the shock and stared at Gu suspiciously. Who is this guy? He should be very familiar with Imperial Father and Imperial Mother. Otherwise, how could she snatch him away from Imperial Mother's arms? How could Imperial Mother not be worried? Gu's narrow and flirtatious eyes suddenly looked straight into Rui's black and white eyes. The look in his eyes was the same as the way he looked at his poison lass. It was filled with love. Rui didn't back down and looked straight into his eyes. Rui realized that this uncle's eyes were very beautiful. Other than his father's eyes, this was the most beautiful pair of eyes he had ever seen. Rui, quick, call me Godfather. Gu's excitement was no less than the joy of becoming a father for the first time. Little Rui was confused. What the hell is Godfather? He had never heard of this word before. Rui finally regained his senses. He didn't want anyone to carry him. He was about to struggle when Gu Qixiao suddenly lifted him high into the air. And Rui's eyes lit up and his confused expression turned into disbelief. This uncle dared to lift him up. Following this, would there be? Little Rui had hardly begun to look forward to it when Gu Qixiao suddenly tossed him high up into the air. Rui wasn't afraid at all and only felt that it was especially exciting and fun. He couldn't wait to fly higher. This is so fun. He chuckled, and his laughter was even louder than Tang Tang's. Very soon, he was falling in a straight line, but Gu Qixiao caught him precisely. "TSK, TSK, you look so much like Poison Lass. You look even more alike when you laugh. It'd be great if you had a daughter, but son isn't bad either." Rui clearly looked more like Long Fei Yi. Did Gu misjudge, or did he do it on purpose? As he spoke, he suddenly tossed into the air. This time, he tossed her even higher than before. After a few rounds, couldn't stop giggling as if his acupoint had been hit. Long Fei Yi's gaze followed his son up and down. Although he was expressionless and didn't say anything, he wanted to fly over and pull the little guy down, hold him in his arms, and cover his mouth. Finally, Gu stopped and held Rui in his arms. Rui couldn't stop laughing. "Call me Godfather, quick," Gu urged. Rui was happy, but he still looked at his mother inquisitively. Still, Rui's reaction surprised Long Fei and Han Yunxi. Under normal circumstances, if Rui didn't like or didn't understand something, he would reject it domineeringly and decisively. He rarely asked for his parents' opinion. Gu's game of lifting him up had at least conquered a third of Rui's heart. Before Han Yunxi could say anything, Gu's large hand blocked Rui's view. forcing him to look at him. Quick, call me Godfather. In the future, everything I have will be yours. I promise I'll take you to eat and drink well, and you'll be free. Ahem. Long Fei coughed lightly. It was about to look over when Gu's other hand blocked his view again. Ru'er looked at the red-clothed uncle in front of him, his gaze becoming confused again. Where did this guy come from? How dare he be so presumptuous in front of Imperial Father and Imperial Mother? Gu suddenly conjured a bamboo dragonfly like a magic trick. Do you like it? Ru'er's gaze immediately fell on the bamboo dragonfly with a look of disdain. On the other hand, little Tang Tang looked at it eagerly. She really wanted it. You don't like it? Gu Qixiao switched to another candy and took out a candy. It's sweet, do you want some? Ru'er's disdain gradually turned into disdain. He hated candy the most. Anyone who tried to coax him with candy was an idiot. You don't like candy? Heh, you're just like Godfather. I don't like sweet either. Gu threw away the candy and took out another one. God knows how many things he brought. He changed them one by one. Cloth tigers, roly-poly toys, tangrams, 9 rings, rattles, pottery balls, clay figurines, Lubon locks, and so on. Couldn't help but look down on them. Long Fei was actually a little nervous when he saw Ru'er smiling so happily at first. But when he saw that Gu only took out some childish and boring toys, he wasn't worried at all. Ru'er had played with all of Gu's toys a month or two ago. He had just gotten tired of tangrams, 9 rings, and Lubon locks before coming to number 7 tea house. It wasn't him or Han Yunxi who taught Ru'er these things. It was Ru'er's teacher, Gu Beiwa. Gu took out all the toys he prepared. He was suspicious. Kid, you don't like any of them? Ru'er shook his head expressionlessly. He didn't just dislike them. Gu didn't play with any toys when he was young. In fact, he didn't know what children could play with. The only reason he knew about these toys was because he specifically asked someone. Then what do you like? Gu asked curiously. Long Fei also spoke at this time. Ru'er, come over here. Ru'er glanced at Gu and then at his father. He didn't hesitate and walked over to his father. Ru'er, look at this. Gu quickly took out a seed. Ru'er glanced at it but still wasn't interested. Ru'er looked. Gu Qixiao simply tossed the seed into the snow outside. In a flash, a thorny vine sprouted from the ground and split into multiple vines that floated in the air. Ru'er turned around and was immediately stunned. Gu's plant essence had been completely corroded by the perplexing butterfly illusion, but he still hid a lot of blood vine seeds that he had nurtured with his immortal blood. These seeds had nothing to do with him, and he couldn't control them now. However, these seeds still maintained their rapid growth characteristics. Rushed to the balcony and squatted under the railing, looking at the huge thorny vine that appeared out of nowhere. So magical, so powerful, so fun. Gu glanced at Long Fei smugly and immediately chased after him. He took out another seed. Ru'er, here, plant it. Ru'er didn't hesitate at all and immediately caught it. He looked at the seed and casually threw it out. As soon as the seed landed, it instantly broke out of the ground and grew wildly, growing into a huge blood vine. Its branches waved in the air, baring its fangs and brandishing its claws. Fun. Ru'er finally opened his mouth. This was also the first thing Gu said to him. Gu was happy and grabbed a bunch of thorny vine seeds and stuffed them all into Ru'er's hands. Here, plant a thorny forest here. One had to know that he was no longer immortal and indestructible, so his blood could no longer nurture the blood vines. Every time one of these seeds was used, there would be one less seed left. How could he let Ru'er play with such precious seeds like toys? It was rare for Ru'er to have such a favorite toy, and he had long forgotten about it. He threw the seeds down one by one and planted the thorny vines one by one. He didn't know where these seeds came from and didn't know how to cherish them. He was having so much fun and couldn't stop laughing. Long Fei and the rest sat in the room and looked out from the open door. They found that under the brilliant lights, one big and one small, one red and one purple, 2 figures, one big and one small, looked so harmonious. Ru'er's smile was pure and clean, and Gu's smile was just like a child's. Long Fei watched quietly and didn't disturb them. Rue planted many thorny vines. Finally, when the wind blew, Gu carried him into the room. Rue was holding a big pouch in his hand, and it was obvious that it was full of thorny vine seeds. Gu carried Rue and sat down opposite Long Fei. The palace maids quickly served bowls, chopsticks, and wine. Rue didn't notice that his father was staring at him at this moment. He lowered his head and counted the thorny vine seeds in the pouch. The Grand Tutor had already taught him how to count, and he could now count from 1 to 100. Of course, he would make mistakes occasionally. Gu ordered the palace maids to bring Rue's bowl and chopsticks over. It looked like he was going to feed Rue. Han Yunxi frowned bitterly. She didn't believe that Gu could feed Rue. Even Long Fei couldn't do it until now. There was no other reason except that he didn't have enough patience. Who knew that after Rue's food was brought over, Gu would feed him spoonful by spoonful and Rue would eat obediently and smoothly. Long Fei and Han Yunxi were dumbfounded. Rue had been completely bought over by Gu's thorny vine seeds. Long Fei was about to speak when Gu interrupted. No matter how big the matter is, let's wait. A child's food is more important than anything else. Long Fei was speechless. Tang Li, who was feeding Tang Tang, looked up and said seriously, yes. Chapter 12:26. How did Tang Li and Gu become the same kind of people? Long Fei ignored everyone but stared at his precious son. Unfortunately, his son hadn't spared him a single glance ever since he'd entered the house. Han Yunxi finally realized that there was something wrong with the way they'd been eating over the past few nights. She lowered her head silently and ate without saying a word. Gu carried little Rue and fed him energetically. As for Tang Li, not only did he care about his precious daughter, but he also took special care of Ning Jing. He helped Ning Jing pick up a bunch of food and said, Ning Jing, my brother said that we don't have to be so polite when eating with our family. You don't have to be polite with them. Ning Jing was still able to let go of Han Yunxi. However, it would be a lie to say that Ning Jing was not nervous to eat at the same table as Long Fei. Ning Jing was so nervous that she was very restrained. If not for Tang Li picking up food for her, she would probably only be able to eat plain rice. Other than Han Yunxi, who else in the world could be completely relaxed eating at the same table as Long Fei? Even if Mu Ling was here, she would not dare to mess with her chopsticks. After a while, Tang Li saw that Ning Jing's bowl was full of food. He asked, Ning Jing, why aren't you eating? As he spoke, he picked up a piece of fish and fed it to Ning Jing. Try it. This fish is delicious. Instantly, Ning Jing's face turned red. She could not eat it, but she could not eat it either. She smiled and said, give it to Tang Tang. Tang Tang likes to eat fish. Tang Li put the fish into Tang Tang's bowl and asked seriously, what do you want to eat? I'll do it myself. Hurry up and feed your daughter so that she can play by herself, Ning Jing said. Seeing the two of you eat makes me full, Tang Li said jokingly. If it was any other time, Ning Jing would have rolled her eyes at him. Tang Li's flowery words were getting more and more ridiculous. However, at this dinner table, she could only smile with a red face. Han Yunxi stole a glance at Ning Jing and almost laughed out loud. Fortunately, she held it in. Otherwise, Ning Jing would probably leave midway. Just like that, the dinner that should have been lively became especially quiet, until Tang Li finished feeding his daughter and put her to the side to play with toys, and Gu let Granny Zhao carry her away. The atmosphere became more normal. When Granny Zhao carried little Rue was still counting. He didn't know that in that short period of time, what he had done had made his father very decisive and firm in his decision to work hard to have a daughter. Long Fei had been too busy at the beginning of the country to spend time with Rue. Thus, he hesitated to have a second child so soon, lest he had even less time for Rue. But today, little Rue had successfully challenged his patience. This stinking brat's fearless days would soon be over. Seventh young master, does this estate belong to you? Han Yunxi still wanted to know the answer. Gu Qixiao openly admitted, Tea House 1 to Tea House 10 are all mine. I'm planning to open Tea House 7 and 7. Poison Lass, Chi Big Brother will leave 7 to 7 to 7 for you. I've already picked out the land. Long Fei Yi said, all lands under the heavens belong to the king. All of Cloud Realm Continent belong to him. So why would Gu pick out a piece of land? But Gu only said, I'll pick one near Medicine Ghost Valley. Later, I'll build an estate there. He purposely looked at Long Fei Yi and asked, Your Majesty, that prefecture is this official's fief, right? Long Fei Yi had made him Qin Wang and given him the prefecture of Medicine Ghost Valley. Thus, even if all lands under the heavens belonged to the king, that prefecture was still his. It's good that you still know you're a Qin Wang, Long Fei Yi said. Since he was a Qin Wang and had a fief, Gu had a responsibility to the land. At the very least, he had to ensure the people lived in peace and contentment, take charge of an army, and pay taxes on time. But Gu had disappeared for half a year without doing anything. If Long Fei Yi hadn't sent civil and military officials over and set up a yamen, the prefecture would have long fallen into chaos. Gu finally realized that he not only had the right to use his fief, but the duty to manage it as well. He grew serious and said, Long Fei Yi, I've been researching medicinal tea recently, so I don't have time to deal with those unruly people. Lend me the people you sent for a few more years. Long Fei Yi's attention was immediately drawn to the words medicinal tea. Gu understood tea, but he wasn't addicted to it. Thus, the two of them couldn't get along. But he still admired Gu's ability to research new varieties of tea. Medicine. Han Yuqi grew curious as well. It's both tea and medicine. Tea has medicinal properties to begin with, but they're not strong. If we can make tea with strong medicinal properties, then we can use tea as medicine for minor ailments, Gu explained. According to Han Yunqi's understanding, the term medicinal tea appeared in the Tang dynasty. Later on, tea was classified as medicine in the Song dynasty. She didn't think that Gu would have such an idea. But thinking about it carefully, Gu was pill fiend, and he was someone who understood tea. It wasn't strange for him to think of this. Tell Ling about it later. She'll definitely be interested. Han Yuqi only said it casually and didn't mean anything else. But Gu avoided it like the plague. Please don't. He needed at least 3 to 4 years to research medicinal tea. If Mu Ling found out about this, wouldn't that girl pester him for 3 to 4 years? Not to mention that girl's feelings towards him. Her research on medicinal tea was also infatuated. Interesting. Long Fei Yi said thoughtfully, medicinal tea is mostly nourishing medicine. I'll have new products later. Hee. I promised to send them to the palace. Gu quickly said, was this considered bribe? Long Fei Yi really was bribed and didn't pursue Gu's crime of neglecting his duties. Actually, anyone with a discerning eye could tell that Long Fei's style of appointing people based on their merits had no intention of letting Gu Qixiao govern his lands. He simply wanted to give Gu Qixiao some glory and a sense of belonging. A Qin Wang was the highest rank among all of the nobility. Only members of the imperial clan had the right to receive such a title. By making Gu Qixiao a Qin Wang, Long Fei was telling the world that Gu Qixiao was his brother. Long Fei Yi wasn't in a hurry to pursue the matter of the yet-to-be-built 7 Tea House. He said, 7 Tea House. Gu knew what he was going to say. Before he could say anything, he immediately interrupted, 7 Tea House is my first birthday gift to Richter. I just told him about it, and he likes it very much. Long Fei Yi, don't fight with your son for things. If you want to give him a manor, build one for him yourself. Buying and selling was voluntary, so it was fine if Gu refused to sell. He even mocked Long Fei Yi and poked at Long Fei Yi's sore spot. For one thing, Gu mocked him for fighting with a child. For another, Gu wanted him to build one for himself, which was simply poking at his sore spot. Everyone knew that he liked to buy land and estates even more. His businesses were spread all over Cloud Realm Continent. If this was the past, he could buy as much as he wanted without anyone bothering him. But things were different now. He was the ruler of a nation. Cloud Realm Continent had many things waiting to be done. Northernly still needed to be plucked, the east and west needed to be rebuilt, and the imperial capital and palace were still under construction. If he didn't touch the national treasury's silver and use his own private savings to build or renovate a new manor, his subordinates would have a lot of opinions. It was rare for him to find a ready-made manor that caught his eye. Even if he sold it privately, no one would know. Unfortunately, he met Gu. Long Fei's expression visibly changed. Meanwhile, Han Yunxi, Tang Li, and Ning Jing had been quietly listening to the two bicker the entire time. At last, they couldn't help but laugh out loud. It wasn't easy. Gu and Long Fei had fought for so many years, but thanks to Rei he'd finally won once. Han Yunxi laughed until her stomach hurt. This was the first time she'd seen Long Fei suffer a loss. Gu Qixiao picked up his wine cup and offered Long Fei a toast with a smile. His movements were elegant as he slowly drank from his cup. Although Long Fei was aggrieved by his son's actions, he still maintained his gentleman's demeanor and returned Gu Qixiao's toast with a toast. "Don't worry, I won't steal from you. In 2 years, I'll definitely build one for Rei." It wouldn't be too late for him to take revenge after the imperial palace was built and the mess after the war was cleaned up. Long Fei drank as he looked towards the right corner, only to see that his precious son had turned a deaf ear to everything that was going on. Right now, he was sitting on the table and counting the thorny vine seeds one by one. Everyone followed his gaze and knew that rather than saying that Long Fei was tricked by Gu, it would be better to say that he was tricked by his own son. If Rui didn't casually accept other people's gifts, wouldn't his imperial father not be mocked? Little Rui seemed to have noticed something. He turned around and was immediately stunned. Why were these adults staring at him instead of eating their meals? Annoying. He hurriedly put the bramble vine seed back into the big embroidered pouch and ran down the table to the side hall. Other than being afraid of noise and being a man of few words, he was also like his imperial father and hated being stared at. Fortunately, these people were his own people. If they were a group of women, he would be angry. Only when Rei's figure disappeared through the door did Gu turn around. TSK, Long Fei, you're so lucky to have such a son." Gu's words were from the bottom of his heart. However, to the people present, he was still teasing Long Fei. Finally, Tang Li couldn't sit still anymore. He stood up and threw a pot of strong wine to Gu. "You were the one who got me drunk back then, right? Do you dare?" Gu was in disbelief. Tang Li, a loser, still dared to challenge him? But Tang Li's next words were, "Do you dare to fight with my big bro?" Long Fei already knew what Tang Li was going to say. Ning Jing and Han Yunxi sat at the side and looked at Tang Li with disdain. "I don't dare." Gu generously admitted defeat. He said with a smile, "I have to accompany my godson to set off fireworks tonight. I can't get drunk." As soon as he said this, Long Fei's eyes flashed. Long Fei was worried about how to send Rei away tonight and accompany Han Yunxi to have a good tea spring. Since Gu volunteered, he would naturally give him a chance to let Gu see his godson's ability to cause a ruckus in the middle of the night when he couldn't find his mother. Long Fei didn't say anything. He picked up the wine and took a sip. He suddenly felt very happy about this dinner. Victory or defeat between him and Gu Qixiao would only be decided after tonight. Chapter 12:27. Tang Li didn't understand why Long Fei didn't intend to get Gu drunk. However, he didn't dare to continue provoking Gu. He knew his alcohol tolerance very well. If he got drunk, what would happen to Ning Jing and Tang Tang? Ning Jing didn't eat much at night. If she was hungry, she wouldn't be able to sleep. And Tang Tang couldn't get used to the bed. She had just gotten used to the carriage, so it would take a long time to coax her sleep on the couch tonight. If he remembered correctly, Ning Jing couldn't stay up late these 2 days. She couldn't stand for too long, and she couldn't carry heavy loads. Tang Li didn't kick up a fuss. After Long Fei and Gu fought for a while, they both fell silent. Now that the two of them stopped fighting, Han Yunxi finally had a chance to speak. "Gu, you left without saying goodbye for the past few months. Where have you been planting tea?" Gu scratched his head and didn't say anything. When he woke up in the medical school and found out that he had regained his normal body, he wasn't used to it. He needed time to calm down and get used to his wholehearted, normal self. Of course, there was another reason why he left. He wanted to avoid Mu Ling. He really wanted to avoid that girl and let her grow up. Han Yunxi didn't pursue the matter of Gu Qixiao's lies, but Gu Qixiao would never know how many tears his poison lass had shed for him on the mountain behind rear camp. Let bygones be bygones. Gu didn't know that Long Fei Yi and the rest would come here for the new year. It was purely a coincidence that they met. Although Long Fei Yi sent the Shadow Guard to track him down, he still managed to shake off the Shadow Guard in less than 10 days and disappeared without a trace. He began to look for suitable land, design a manor, and plant tea trees. He wanted to prepare a birthday present for Rui and personally present it to him at his birthday banquet. He had designed several tea houses in a row, but after they were built, he found that he was not satisfied with them until he designed the Tea Hot Spring unique to number 7 tea house. When he used the tea hot springs and other tea houses, he found a business opportunity. So, he built tea houses number 8, number 9, and number 10 one after another. From there, he had the idea of building 77 tea houses. Every single tea house was doing extremely well. If he could build 77 tea houses that were all satisfactory in terms of location, design, and tea ceremony, he'd probably be able to monopolize all of Cloud Realm Continent's tea houses and become the richest man in the region. In fact, number 7 tea house had been built long ago. It was just that in the past month, he had repeatedly modified it down to every blade of grass and every tree. This was his godfather's birthday gift to Reiker, so he couldn't be careless. He was originally not in the vicinity, but a few days ago, he suddenly had a new idea to improve the manor, so he braved the wind and snow to rush over. "Where's Gu Beiwei? Why didn't he come?" Gu asked. "Qi Min is pregnant and her body isn't very good. She can't stand the cold, so he brought her to the south to avoid the cold," Han Yunxi said faintly. So fast, Tang Li was very surprised. Ning Jing had also told him about Gu Beiwei marrying Qin Min. It hadn't even been half a year since they got married. Ning Jing was also surprised. She didn't expect Dr. Gu to be so fast. "Then we'll have to be careful. How many months is she along?" Ning Jing couldn't help but ask. "Should be around 5 months. Don't worry. With Gu Beiwei around, there won't be any trouble," Han Yunxi said with a smile. Tang Li immediately said, "Doesn't that mean she got pregnant as soon as she got married?" Dr. Gu really is Dr. Gu. Everyone present was an adult. Everyone could hear the meaning behind Tang Li's words. Gu Qixiao's lips quirked up into a grin, but he didn't express his opinion. He figured that Gu Beiwei must have put his present to good use. Otherwise, with Gu Beiwei's personality and usual behavior, how could she get pregnant as soon as she got married? Long Fei didn't say anything. However, he was as surprised as everyone else. He didn't expect the gentle Gu Beiwei to be so decisive. Long Fei Yi thought to himself, Qin Min probably wouldn't give birth to a daughter. As spring approached, Su Donglin led a group of Shadow Guard and set off fireworks not far away on time. Although the overnight dinner wasn't very lively, everyone chatted in the silence and forgot about the time. Seeing the fireworks bloom and light up the night sky, everyone realized that the past year had ended and a new year had begun. As soon as they heard the firecrackers, the 2 children rushed out first. Little Tang Tang was still holding the cloth tiger that Little Rui didn't want, while Little Rui was holding the big purse with both hands, afraid that it would fall. Han Yunxi and the rest also walked out and stood on the balcony to watch the fireworks. So beautiful. Han Yunxi couldn't help but think of the fireworks she saw during the Lantern Festival. Under the combined efforts of Long Fei Yi and the other 2, she knew nothing about Gu. She was still in confinement, and Little was still a baby in swaddling clothes. Time passed so quickly. At some point, Long Fei had taken Han Yunxi's hand. Their fingers were intertwined as they looked forward to spending years and years together until the end of time. Tang Li also held Ning Jing's hand. He whispered, "Ning Jing, I haven't seen fireworks with you before, right? How many times have you seen them?" Ning Jing asked. "What I mean is, we haven't seen them together since you started liking me, right?" Tang Li lowered his voice and was extremely gentle. Ning Jing was stunned and whispered back, "We have. I have liked you for a long time." Tang Li leaned closer and smiled. "I've liked you for a long time, too." Granny Zhao was holding a tray full of red packets. As in the past, Long Fei Yi still generously gave out red packets to everyone present. Han Yunxi turned back and instructed the palace maid, "Go and check the red packets and the list on the table in my room. Send them out tonight." She had already made a list of the red packets to be rewarded and prepared the red packets with names written on them. Only the final check was left to check if there were any omissions. If she hadn't chased after little Rui, she would have finished checking by herself. Yes. The palace maid accepted the order and left. At this time, Long Fei Yi was personally delivering the red packets to little Rui. He was too tall, and little Rui was too small. It was difficult for little Rui to look up at him several times. He really wanted to hug little Rui, but he hesitated and didn't. It was the new year, and he didn't want little Rui to cry again. He squatted down, and little Rui immediately ran to him. In fact, little Rui didn't reject him. He was just afraid of him. He didn't reject his approach, but he was afraid of letting him touch and hug him. Little Rui was still so young. No matter how precocious he was still a child. How could his reaction be deliberate? This rejection was like an instinctive reaction, although he didn't understand why. Long Fei Yi always believed that there must be a reason for this. Even if there were times when he was really disappointed, Long Fei Yi had never been angry with his son. He had never really complained. Little Rui was still so young. He only felt sorry for him. In the whole world, only Han Yunxi knew how much he loved and doted on little Rui. A father's tenderness was always hidden in his heart. Long Fei Yi handed the red packets to Rui, smiled at him, and got up. The last time little Rui received a red packet for the new year, he was still in his mother's womb. This was the first time he received a red packet since he was born. Not only did he not know the meaning of a red packet, but he also didn't have the concept of banknotes. He held the red packet in his hand and seemed to have thought of something. After the red packets were distributed, the children ran to see the fireworks again. Gu looked to the left at Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi, then to the right at Tang Li and Ning Jing. He immediately laughed. He didn't know if he was laughing at himself for being alone or if he was happy. Perhaps even he himself couldn't tell the difference. He immediately ran to the two children lying on the railing and carried them one in each hand. Strangely enough, not only was willing to be carried by Gu, but even little Tang Tang didn't refuse at all. Gu let little Rui sit on his left shoulder and carried little Tang Tang with his right hand. He was a tall man and didn't need any effort to carry the two children. "Let's go set off the fireworks, okay?" he asked loudly. "Okay." The two children actually reconciled and answered in unison. "Godfather didn't prepare any gifts for you. I'll play with you tonight, okay?" Gu asked again. Little Tang Tang immediately shut up. Rui looked back at his father and mother with the same inquisitive gaze. At this time, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi knew that although Rui accepted Gu's gift, he still didn't acknowledge him as his godfather. Han Yunxi didn't say anything. She could make the decision to acknowledge little Rui as his godmother. Only Long Fei Yi could make the decision to acknowledge little Rui as his godfather. Gu looked at the dazzling fireworks in the distance and recalled the night he watched the fireworks alone at the back mountain of rear camp. He didn't notice little Rui's hesitation, nor did he see Long Fei Yi nod to little Rui. Whether it was broad-mindedness or comradeship, fighting or fighting, Long Fei simply nodded his head in agreement. "Okay." Little Rui answered loudly. "Daughter, accompany seventh uncle to have some fun, okay?" Tang Li asked loudly. "Okay." Little Tang Tang also answered loudly. Just like that, Gu Qixiao leapt off the balcony with the two children in tow and ran into the snow. Tang Li tilted his head and looked at Long Fei Yi with a smile. "Brother, it's a new year. I wish the country prosperity and peace, and let sister-in-law give birth to a daughter for you." Long Fei Yi looked back with a rare smile. "May you return to the Tang sect as soon as possible." With that, Long Fei Yi held Han Yunxi's hand and left. His words were enough to make Tang Li ponder for days and nights. Was Long Fei Yi going to help him return to the Tang sect? Or was he unhappy and wanted to help Tang Zijin bring him back to the Tang sect? Tang Li walked all the way to his residence, still unable to figure it out. He finally realized that he shouldn't provoke his brother with his daughter. Otherwise, the consequences would be very serious. Shopkeeper Wu and the servants in the manor were replaced, and the ones in charge were Zhao Mama and Su Donglin. The courtyard where Tang Li and Ning Jing lived was arranged by Zhao Mama. He didn't know what Zhao Mama was thinking, but she actually arranged for them to live in a very remote corner in the west. It took a lot of time just to walk over. When they reached the room, Ning Jing was so tired that she didn't want to move and lazily laid down on the warm couch. She only relaxed when she was back in the room. Although she had a good relationship with Han Yunxi, she hadn't seen Long Fei Yi more than 3 times. Recently, when they ate together, she finally understood why Mu Ling was afraid of Long Fei Yi. Ning Jing stretched her body, but Tang Li had already scooped up a wooden basin of steaming hot tea and placed it on the couch. "What are you doing?" Ning Jing asked suspiciously. Chapter 1228. The hot spring water was steaming, and the aroma of tea permeated every corner of the house. Ning Jing did not understand what Tang Li was trying to do. "You can't soak in the hot spring, so I'll get you a basin to soak your feet," Tang Li explained. "How do you know that I can't soak in the hot spring?" Ning Jing asked. "I've calculated. It's inconvenient for you to soak in these 2 days. Am I right?" Tang Li asked with a smile. "You're wrong." Ning Jing rolled her eyes at him. "It's more than 10 days off. How did you calculate it?" "Impossible. It's before and after the first day of Chinese New Year. It's always been like this before, unless the postpartum days have changed." Tang Li was very certain. Ning Jing narrowed her eyes. "Before? Haha, you've really put a lot of thought into this." Tang Li realized that he had fallen into Ning Jing's trap this time. For a few days before and after the first day of Chinese New Year, he was very conscious that he would not bully Ning Jing. When he calculated the dates back then, his motives were indeed impure. "Hee, I put a lot of thought into this now. Jing Jing, come, your husband will help you soak your feet." Tang Li lifted Ning Jing's feet and helped her take off her shoes and socks. Ning Jing laid down lazily and put her other foot on his shoulder, allowing Tang Li to serve her. After her shoes and socks were taken off, Tang Li was afraid that she would be too cold and wanted to warm her up. Ning Jing did not let him and stretched her jade foot on Tang Li's face to tease him. Tang Li allowed her to tease him. He was not angry at all, nor did he dislike it. However, after a while, he grabbed Ning Jing's jade foot and bit her thumb. It looked like he bit hard, but it did not hurt at all. Ning Jing immediately kicked him away and complained unhappily. "Don't you think it's dirty?" "I don't." Tang Li chuckled. "I do," Ning Jing said angrily. Tang Li pretended to sigh. "All right, I'll help you clean it up." He really pulled her feet to soak in the spring water. If it was any other time, Ning Jing would definitely let him serve her without any qualms. However, today was not the day. Ning Jing quickly retracted her foot and said seriously, "You can't soak your feet when it's inconvenient." "Why?" Tang Li asked in confusion. Ning Jing asked, "No means no. You're a man. Why are you asking so many questions?" Only then did Tang Li give up and sit next to Ning Jing. However, just as he was about to lie down, Ning Jing pushed him away. "I'm going to sleep. Go soak yourself in the water and don't disturb me. Tang will be back soon. I'll lie down with you." Tang Li insisted on lying down next to Ning Jing. However, Ning Jing refused to let him and pushed him away. "Don't disturb me. I want to rest for a while, okay?" Seeing her unhappy look, Tang Li felt wronged and could only get up obediently. "Get out," Ning Jing urged. Tang Li smiled helplessly and could only obediently go out. After 2 hours, Ning Jing helped Tang Li get a towel and clothes and went out. She couldn't go into the water for a few days. If she didn't force him, Tang Li probably wouldn't go into the water either. It was rare that little Tang Li wasn't around. Of course, as her father, Tang Li could relax a little. When Ning Jing opened the door, she saw that the warm pool was empty. Where was he? Just as she was wondering, she saw Tang Li carrying a small casserole pot and walking in hurriedly with his head lowered. He carried it carefully and didn't even notice that she was standing at the door. Ning Jing's heart skipped a beat, and her eyes became a little moist. This scene was so familiar and so long since she last saw it. She didn't need to look to know that Tang Li was cooking her favorite red bean porridge in that small casserole pot. In the past countless nights, she couldn't remember how many bowls of red bean porridge Tang Li had made for her. Every time, he would personally bring it to her like this. He was careful and anxious because it was too hot and his fingers couldn't stand it. He was also afraid that it would get cold if it stayed too long. On cold nights, she liked hot food that was scalding. When he got closer, Tang Li finally noticed that Ning Jing was standing at the door. He saw the thing in her hand and said with a smile, "Jing Jing, do you really want to peek at me bathing so much?" Ning Jing rolled her eyes and turned to enter the door. Tang Li carried the red bean porridge in and personally filled a bowl. He brought it to Ning Jing and said, "Are you hungry?" Ning Jing was indeed hungry. However, when she saw that Tang Li had personally made the red bean porridge, she immediately regained her appetite. Only Tang Li could make such a soft and fragrant red bean porridge. Ning Jing chewed and swallowed slowly. Tang Li stood at the side and watched as usual. If he truly liked someone, he didn't need to do anything. Just watching her eat would make him happy. If he truly liked someone, he didn't need anything. As long as he personally made a bowl of porridge, he would be satisfied. "Jing Jing, do you have any news about your brother?" Tang Li asked. "No. With my brother's temper, if he wants to leave, no one can find him." Ning Jing knew Ning Cheng the best. Tang Li hesitated and said, "Why did he give all his military merits to Jin Zi? Based on his contributions in Northern Li, my brother definitely won't treat him unfairly. Public is public, private is private." Ning Jing raised her head this time and said seriously, "Tang Li, my brother isn't someone who takes credit. He must have left because he felt that he was done with his work. If you have the chance, tell Long Fei Yi not to look for him anymore." Tang Li snorted. "Humph, my brother won't look for him. He's too free." Ning Jing put down the spoon and threatened him coldly. "I dare you to snort again." Tang Li shut his mouth and shook his head. Ning Jing lowered her head to eat the porridge again. She was already full, but it had been too long since she tasted this, so she couldn't help but eat a few more mouthfuls. Not long after, the palace maid personally carried little Tang Tang over. Little Tang Tang had actually fallen asleep. It was no wonder, since it was already in the middle of the night. No matter how excited a child was, she wouldn't be able to hold on for long. Ning Jing wanted to pick her up, but Tang Li ran over first and carefully carried little Tang Tang over. Tang Li was amused. "Haha, it's good that she's asleep. Saves me the trouble of coaxing her." Little Tang Tang returned to her parents' arms, but little Rui was still playing with Gu. Gu wasn't an ordinary person, and little Rui was even more so. So it wasn't strange that the two of them were still setting off fireworks in a manner in the middle of the night. At this time, Granny Zhao had just arrived at the Narcissus courtyard where Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi were staying. The Narcissus courtyard was located in the center of number 7 tea house. It was the largest courtyard in number 7 tea house and got its name because it was filled with Narcissus tea. Rather than calling it a courtyard, it was better to call it a tea pavilion. There was a tea room hidden in the spacious courtyard. It looked very secluded, but it felt spacious inside the house. There were 2 rooms in front and back of the tea room. The left and right walls were open, and there were 2 or 3 wooden steps connecting to the courtyard. There was a tea hot spring in the pavilion. Inside the tea room, there was a straw mat on the floor. It was clean and simple, and green smoke rose in spirals from the burning incense. Outside the tea room, steam rose from the hot spring amidst the white snow. The faint fragrance of tea filled the air, both sobering and intoxicating. Such an environment was definitely tempting to those who love tea. Granny Zhao stopped outside the tea room and saw only the Empress inside. She was sitting at a low table, lazily reading a book. Her ink-black hair was casually held up with a jade hairpin. She had already changed out of her daytime clothes and was wrapped in a crescent white robe. She sat there lazily, one hand supporting her head while the other flipped through a book. Her body was leaning against the side of the tea table. The long sleeves on the hand supporting her head had long slipped down, revealing her pure white wrists. Her jade feet were half hidden under the robe, faintly discernible. Black hair like a waterfall, white wrists like frost. The more Granny Zhao looked at such a back view, the more satisfied and happy she was. For no particular reason, she was happy that His Highness was blessed. Han Yunshi had long known that Granny Zhao was coming. Although she had brought many palace maids with her, she and Long Fei Yi were not used to having palace maids serving them. Apart from the shadow guard standing guard outside the Narcissus Garden, there were no other servants in the entire Narcissus Garden. At this time, the shadow guard would not dare to come over without permission. The only one who could come here was Granny Zhao. Han Yunshi and Long Fei Yi had been strolling in the tea garden for a long time. She had just finished washing up. She was so tired that she did not want to move. If not for the fact that Ru'er had not returned, she would have fallen asleep long ago. She was waiting for Granny Zhao to report something, but Granny Zhao did not speak for a long time. Han Yunshi was helpless. She lazily turned back to look at Granny Zhao. Granny Zhao hurriedly reported, "Your Highness, this old servant has urged many times, but the little master refuses to come back and insists on playing with seventh young master. Seventh young master said that he will let the little master spend the night at his place, and that you can sleep without worry. He can't handle it," Han Yunshi said helplessly. This old servant has already told seventh young master that the little master is not easy to serve at night, but seventh young master said that he can do it. Granny Zhao was also helpless. Asking for trouble again, Han Yunshi was too lazy to persuade her. She waved her hand to dismiss Granny Zhao. Then let him take care of the little master for one night. Although Han Yunshi doted on her son, the way she doted on Ru'er was completely different from how Tang Li doted on his daughter. She was not so careful with Ru'er and was very cruel most of the time. After all, Ru'er was a boy and would have to be independent in the future. "Your Highness, don't worry. If seventh young master can't coax him, this old servant will," Granny Zhao said with a smile. Han Yunshi nodded lazily. She was about to fall asleep. However, Granny Zhao still did not leave. She looked around and asked, "Your Highness, is His Majesty asleep?" Long Fei Yi was in the side room dealing with 2 urgent letters from Northern Li. Han Yunshi was waiting for him to finish and go to bed. "Is there anything else?" Han Yunshi asked. Granny Zhao chuckled. "Your Highness, if His Highness is asleep, you should go and keep him company as soon as possible." Han Yunshi immediately sensed that something was wrong. She turned back again and stared at Granny Zhao without saying anything. Unexpectedly, Granny Zhao was not afraid. Instead, she smiled even more ambiguously. She said, "It's good that Your Highness understands. It's good that Your Highness understands." Han Yunshi grabbed something on the table and gestured that she was going to smash it. Granny Zhao hurriedly fled this time. "This old servant will take her leave. Take her leave." At this moment, Long Fei Yi opened the door and jumped in fright. The thing that Han Yunshi was going to smash was none other than his teacup. Ever since Ru'er was born, Long Fei Yi had already lost more than 30 sets of tea sets. They were all masterpieces and were one of a kind. The set that he brought out this time was his favorite among the few that remained. "Han Yunshi, don't move." He hurriedly stopped her. Han Yunshi was originally tired, but she immediately sobered up when she saw Granny Zhao's ambiguous smile. She turned back to look at Long Fei Yi and smiled slyly. "Should I not move the person or the cup?" Chapter 1229. Did Long Fei Yi want Han Yunshi to stay still, or did he only want the cup to stay still? If he said, "Don't move," then the cup would probably move and fall to the ground. If he said, "Don't move the cup," then Han Yunshi's hand would probably move and the cup would be thrown away. Han Yunshi was in a good mood. She was so talkative, but Long Fei Yi was still sober and wouldn't be easy to fool. He said, "Don't move." Han Yunshi also knew that she couldn't play word games with this guy, so she asked playfully, "Long Fei Yi, what if I insist on moving?" Although his real name was Xianyuan Yi and everyone knew it, she still liked to call him Long Fei Yi. In all of Cloud Realm, only she and Gu dared to call him Long Fei Yi in front of him. Xian Yuan Yi was the high and mighty emperor of Cloud Realm. His glory and power were also shackles. In their hearts, Long Fei Yi was still the same Long Fei Yi. Long Fei Yi didn't answer Han Yunqi. Han Yunqi asked with a smile, "Tell me, should I move, or should the cup move?" She suddenly let go of the cup, causing it to fall to the ground, but it landed firmly in her other hand. Long Fei Yi also leaned against the wall, arms crossed lazily. His lips curled into a smile as he sized up Han Yunqi's little tricks with interest. He wasn't in a hurry either, so he didn't say anything and just let her play. Han Yunqi suddenly let go of the cup again. This time, she caught it with the tip of her foot. This was Long Fei Yi's favorite cup. But he wasn't angry, and the smile on his face didn't fade at all. Han Yunqi was actually waiting for Long Fei Yi to snatch it away, but who knew that he'd just watch with folded arms. She kicked the cup high and carefully held it with one finger. "Come, I'll give you a choice. Choose it or choose me. I'm serious this time." Long Fei Yi didn't even think about it and gave her the answer directly. "I choose you." Han Yunqi was overjoyed. "All right, it's either me or it." As she spoke, she casually threw the teacup out of the tea house. She really threw it out of the tea house. However, Long Fei Yi was still not in a hurry. He did not even look at the teacup. He only stared at Han Yunqi. After her bath, she looked like a lotus flower emerging from the clear water. She looked like a natural carving. He looked at her creamy skin and smooth neckline. He looked at her beautiful eyebrows and beautiful smile. The more he looked at it, the more he liked it. What was a teacup? She could overturn the entire world for her. Han Yunqi turned around and looked outside. She smiled and sighed. How generous! In fact, she had calculated correctly. With the strength she had used just now, the teacup would fall into the tea pool and would not break. At this moment, the teacup should have sunk to the bottom of the pool. Long Fei Yi walked over and hugged Han Yunqi's waist from behind. He gently pulled Han Yunqi into his arms. He rested his chin on Han Yunqi's shoulder and looked at the tea and snow outside the door like her. He asked lazily, "I haven't stretched my muscles for a long time. Let's have a match, shall we?" In front of this man, Han Yunqi had always been very self-aware. After he cultivated the lust bite power, it was merged with the full level of the nirvana power. It was very powerful. Her phoenix power had not been completely stimulated. Moreover, the phoenix power did not have the ability to merge with the nirvana power. Therefore, in terms of martial arts, she was still a long way behind him. She would definitely lose when it came to moving her muscles. Han Yunqi leaned her head closer to Long Fei Yi and rejected him decisively. "No way. It's rare that you're free. Rui is not here. Accompany me to look at the snow." Long Fei tightened his grip on her and began to rub against her ears. "I'll let you win. If you win, I'll give you a big gift. How about it? What are we competing in?" Han Yunqi was immediately moved. If he let her win, she would have another chance. Of course, what really made her waver was his big gift. Her past experience told her that the things he gave were not ordinary. She could not even imagine it. "I'll let you take 10 steps. Whoever finds this teacup first wins." Han Yunqi did not know that at this moment, Long Fei Yi was licking his lips and smiling. He was like a scheming fox and a hunter patiently waiting for his prey to take the bait. When she heard that it was not a martial arts competition, but a way to stretch her muscles, she became even more interested. "Okay, let's compete. If I win, you'll give me a big gift too?" Long Fei Yi smiled. "No problem." Han Yunqi readily agreed. It would take about 10 steps to walk from here to the tea pool. She was very clear about the position of the teacup. If she moved faster, her chances of winning would be higher. Long Fei Yi immediately let go of Han Yunqi. "Go!" Han Yunqi took big strides. 10 steps was just enough to reach the tea pool. She turned to look at Long Fei Yi. Long Fei Yi did not move as expected. In a competition between experts, a difference of 1 step could be 1,000 miles, let alone 10 steps. Han Yunqi was full of confidence. "Shall we begin?" "Okay, let's begin." When Long Fei Yi said this, Han Yunqi did not even turn around. She leaned back and dove into the tea pool. Long Fei didn't chase after her immediately. Every time he yielded to her, he'd done so with sincerity. He licked his lips with interest and could not help but laugh out loud. He was cunning and mischievous, but his happiness was very pure and genuine. He slowly took off his outer robe, and this time, he flew into the tea pool. Although there were lights in the courtyard, it was still late at night. Finding the teacup could only be done by touching. Han Yunshi hid at the position where the teacup had fallen and groped around. Even when she sensed Long Fei Ye's movements, she did not panic. Suddenly, she touched the teacup. She was overjoyed. Just as she was about to grab it, Long Fei Ye's hand suddenly reached out from the side and grabbed the teacup first. His speed was so fast that Han Yunshi wanted to cry. The two of them came out of the water almost at the same time. Long Fei Yi wiped the water off his face. Seeing Han Yunshi's depressed expression, he laughed. Han Yunshi really wanted to pounce on him and bite him. How could this guy be so fast in the water? Why didn't she know before? How could it be so close? Did he do it on purpose? You've lost, Long Fei said in all seriousness. Han Yunshi looked at him and did not say anything. Seeing her unwilling and shameless appearance, Long Fei Yi was even more amused. It had been a long time since he had seen this woman act like a little girl. He really missed it. I reached it first, Han Yunshi said seriously. I reached it first. Long Fei Yi did not give in. Didn't you say you would give in to me? Han Yunshi questioned. I gave in to you more than 10 steps. Long Fei Yi said honestly. You? Can't you give in one more step? Han Yunshi asked again. No. Long Fei Yi refused cruelly. Say you lost. Quick. Han Yunshi was unwilling. Her gaze drifted towards the teacup in Long Fei Ye's hand. Long Fei Yi saw it, but did not say anything. Han Yunshi suddenly wanted to snatch it. Long Fei Yi waited for her to snatch it. He waited until her hand reached the cup, but he suddenly raised his hand and made her unable to grab it. Han Yunshi did not say anything. She just stared at Long Fei Yi. The more she stared, the wider the smile in Long Fei Ye's eyes became. There were several times when he almost laughed out loud. Teasing this woman was much more fun than teasing his son. How could Han Yunshi not see the smile in his eyes? This guy could clearly play with her. He deliberately calculated that he would give her 10 steps and make her lose by 1 step. She suddenly grabbed Long Fei Ye's arm and stood on her tiptoes to snatch the teacup. Unfortunately, she still could not reach it. The Empress is good at everything. It's just that she's too short and her arms are too short. Long Fei Yi commented seriously. You, bully. Han Yunshi was so angry that her cheeks puffed up. In the dense steam of the hot spring, her cheeks were pink. That delicate appearance made Long Fei Yi unable to move his eyes away. If you agree to a bet, you must accept your loss. You're shameless. Long Fei Yi raised the teacup high and looked down at Han Yunshi. Han Yunshi had nothing to say. She bit her lip and tried hard to think of a way to compete with Long Fei Yi again and get back at him. These two had tricked everyone in the world. Finally, they started tricking each other. It was very obvious that Han Yunshi was not Long Fei Yi's opponent. Long Fei Yi had started digging this hole for her. In the hot steam of the tea, the pool water reached their waists. Both of them were drenched. One of them stood high above, holding the teacup high and looking down. The other tiptoed and leaned forward, grabbing the other person's arm with all her strength. She was almost sticking to the other person. The two of them were in a deadlock like this. In the dense steam of the tea, this scene was as beautiful as a dream. Even when the two of them were in a stalemate, they were still so beautiful and enviable. At this moment, the two of them were in a contest of gazes. Han Yunshi glared. She looked angry, but she was actually acting coquettishly. Long Fei Yi looked at her with raised eyebrows. He looked serious, but the smile at the corner of his mouth had long betrayed him. In the silence, he suddenly raised his hand and casually threw his favorite teacup away. He did not throw it into the water, but directly to the shore. Bang! It broke. From the beginning to the end, his gaze was on Han Yunshi. Han Yunshi was stunned and very surprised. Long Fei Yi looked at her. There was only affection in his eyes. He asked in a low voice, I already said that I would choose you. Why are you still fighting with me? Han Yunchi bit her lip and could not help but laugh. Say it. What do you want to give me? Long Fei Yi asked seriously. He was so willing to part with that cup. How could she still have the nerve to compete with him? What do you want? If I can afford it, I'll give it to you. Han Yunqi's words were very honest. There's nothing that you can't afford to give me. Long Fei Yi was very certain. What do I want? Han Yunqi asked with a smile. I want. Long Fei Yi wanted to say something but stopped. He bent down and whispered in her ear. Didn't I just say it? Just now? Did he? Han Yunqi's face was blank. She tried to recall what Long Fei had said just then. It was only a few sentences, so she shouldn't have missed anything. Moreover, she couldn't make out any hidden meanings. Han Yunqi almost believed that she was really going to be stupid for 3 years after giving birth. Long Fei Yi chuckled and whispered in her ear, no matter how much I like it, I can throw it away. I only choose you. I want you. Han Yunqi was suddenly enlightened. Her face flushed red in an instant. Han Yunqi finally understood Long Fei Yi's naughtiness. Who knew that he was even naughty? His lips curled into a mischievous smile, and he whispered again, I already said that I haven't exercised for a long time. What do you think I want? Han Yunqi's face turned even redder when he said that. She finally understood that this guy had tricked her. What did he say? I haven't exercised for a long time. Let's have a competition, okay? Exercising was a trap. Have a competition was even more of a trap. Chapter 1230. Taking advantage of Long Fei Yi's lingering affection, Han Yunqi pushed him away and turned to run away. Long Fei Yi let her run. Just as she was about to reach the shore, he waved his hand and created a wall of water, blocking Han Yunqi's escape route. She turned around and glared at him. Can you be more naughty? Yes. Long Fei Yi was in such a good mood that he actually laughed out loud. He put down his hand, and the wall of water shattered into pieces. Han Yunqi's already drenched body became even more drenched. Her thin clothes clung tightly to her body and were basically transparent. All of her beauty and shyness couldn't be hidden. Long Fei Yi's burning gaze was already locked on her body, and he almost couldn't look away. Actually, he didn't want to be naughty at first. He just wanted to play with her and make a scene. He wanted to seriously ask for a daughter. But such a beautiful scene amidst the spiraling mist made him want to be naughty. He wanted to be naughty to the extreme. He said, Han Yunqi, come over and admit defeat. Han Yunqi shook her head without even thinking. He was the one who had set a trap for her. She wasn't going to admit defeat. She walked into the depths of the water, hiding her seductive body. If she didn't hide, he would probably see through her. Long Fei Yi didn't move and let her go into the depths of the water. Han Yunqi's entire body was submerged in the hot water. Only her head was exposed. She looked at Long Fei Yi warily like a little rabbit, as if she was determined to go against him and not admit defeat. Long Fei Yi laughed out loud. This woman's behavior had conquered his desire to conquer her. I'll ask you one last time. Do you admit defeat? Long Fei Yi asked. You tricked me. Han Yunqi protested. Long Fei Yi didn't know how to do that either. He suddenly dived into the water. Han Yunqi was experienced. She immediately dived into the water to guard against Long Fei Yi's sneak attack. Unfortunately, it was pitch black underwater and impossible to guard against. The waves on the surface of the pool were getting bigger, and they didn't know what was happening underwater. When Han Yunqi and Long Fei Yi emerged from the water, they were already on the other side of the pool, and the water was up to their necks. Han Yunqi's soaked clothes had already disappeared, revealing her fair, jade-like back and her beautiful collarbone. Long Fei Yi's clothes were still there. No matter what happened in the water or how their fight went, Long Fei had won in the end. As the two of them faced each other, it was unclear what was happening beneath the water. Han Yunqi seemed to have been trapped in place, as she didn't move, much less try to escape. Long Fei's smile was filled with amusement, but her expression was solemn. More accurately speaking, she was enduring silently. Still not admitting defeat? Long Fei asked next. No, Han Yunqi answered immediately. The water rippled, and Han Yunqi was suddenly pulled over by Long Fei Yi. He looked at her and asked, "Are you admitting defeat?" Han Yunxi turned her head away and frowned. It was obvious that Long Fei Yi had bullied her a lot underwater. She leaned on his shoulder. Her body was obviously admitting defeat, but her mouth was still stubborn. "You tricked me, so I won't. I won't." Long Fei Ye's laughter became gentle. "Sure. Do you believe that you won't even have the chance to admit defeat?" Underwater, just as Long Fei Yi was about to get up, Han Yunxi suddenly turned around and pushed Long Fei Yi to the shore. Long Fei's back slammed against the shore as he raised his arms to lean against the shore. He opened his chest to reveal his well-defined muscles. Han Yunxi came closer and looked at him fiercely. She said provocatively, "Do you believe that you'll have to admit defeat tonight?" Long Fei Yi didn't say anything. He just raised his eyebrows and looked at her. However, when Han Yunxi hugged his neck and raised her head to give herself to him, Long Fei Yi surrendered without saying anything or doing anything. She had tried this move many times, and he couldn't resist it at all. He kissed her consciously and waited for her to take the initiative. Sure enough, when he kissed her, she gave him the best response. No matter how naughty he was, he would be obedient and submissive as long as she kissed him. When she let go of him, there was no naughty look in his eyes, only gentleness. He said, Can you give me a daughter?" Han Yunxi burst out laughing. "So you're doing this for your daughter?" Long Fei Yi said in a low voice. "This time, it's for my daughter. Everything else is for you." "Once? Everything else?" Han Yunxi was shocked. How many times did he want to do it? Before she could react, Long Fei Yi had already carried her in his arms and flew out of the tea pool to the tea room. It didn't matter who won or lost because they had already become one with each other. In the middle of the night, it was New Year's Eve and the beginning of the new year. Han Yunxi ended the past year in a deep sleep due to exhaustion and started a brand new year. God knows how much energy Long Fei Yi had. He carried the sleeping Han Yunxi into a warm fox fur coat and carefully and gently wiped the water stains on her body. He didn't miss a single spot. He wrapped her in the warm bedding and let her rest on his lap. Then he helped her dry her wet hair and comb it until it was soft and smooth. Finally, he took a hairband and gently tied her hair into a bun. His head was bowed, his expression quiet, serious, and focused. He was a completely different person from the domineering man in the hibiscus tent. Besides Han Yunxi, no one else would ever know that this man who stood at the very top of Cloud Realm Continent would personally style her hair in such a gentle manner after making love. Long Fei Yi placed Han Yunxi on the pillow and prepared to leave when Han Yunxi suddenly grabbed his hand and muttered in her sleep, I lost. Fei, I admit defeat." Long Fei broke into a soundless smile, the curve of his lips brilliant and beautiful. He couldn't help but reflect on his lack of sense of propriety and his fear of tormenting her. She had already admitted defeat to his domineering ways just then, but now she was admitting defeat again in her dreams. Idiot! Long Fei Yi couldn't help but lean over to kiss her. He even had the urge to bite down and wake her up for another round, but he held back. He didn't know how much love he had for her, just like how he couldn't figure out how much he loved this woman. How deep. He placed her hand under the bedding and kissed her lightly on the lips before rising to his feet. Judging from past experiences, this woman wouldn't wake up until noon tomorrow. He couldn't sleep now because he still had to wait for little Rui to come back. Although he'd told Gu to take care of Rui and teach him a lesson, he'd also let Gu know that his precious son wasn't so easy to serve. But in the end, he couldn't bear to scare Rui all night. It was better to teach him a lesson. Long Fei Yi changed his clothes and draped a fox fur robe over his shoulders before leaving the tea house. He went all the way out of Narcissus' courtyard to find Rui personally. Su Donglin, who was guarding outside the courtyard, immediately appeared when he saw his master come out. "Master, His Highness the Crown Prince is at Shiha Courtyard." This subordinate just came from there, and His Highness the Crown Prince had just fallen asleep. Gu hugged him to sleep and didn't put him on the bed. Long Fei Ye's face darkened in displeasure. "Gu, this annoying fellow. Rui is already asleep, and he still wants to hog him?" Long Fei Yi strode towards Shiha Courtyard. Who knew that halfway there, He would hear the sound of a child crying in the distance. "It's Rue." Long Fei already knew that Rue would cry, but hearing the cries still made him anxious. He immediately used his qin gong to find him. As he approached, the cries grew louder and louder. Long Fei was so anxious that he frowned. Soon, he saw Gu hugging a wailing Rue and running towards him at a loss. Long Fei, quick, take a look at Rue. What's wrong with him? I can't coax him no matter how I coax him. He was fine before, so he wasn't afraid of me. Gu was about to go crazy. Rue had clearly fallen asleep, but suddenly woke up and started crying as soon as he saw him, crying for his mother and father. He tried to coax him, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't calm him down. In the end, he could only carry him to Long Fei and the rest. If he hadn't held him by force, Rue wouldn't have let him hold him at all. As a matter of fact, while Gu was talking to Long Fei, started wailing again. Sob, sob, mother, father, mother, father. Long Fei's heart ached at the sight of his tear-streaked face as he struggled for his life. He almost ran forward to give him a hug, but he didn't. He stood in place and told Chu Shifeng, "Go find Zhao Mama, quick." Currently, the wailing Rue had no idea that his father was right in front of him. He struggled with all his might until he suddenly bit down viciously on Gu's hand. Rue had already lost 6 teeth, so of course he was in pain. But Gu didn't feel the pain at all. His heart was burning with impatience. He yelled at Long Fei, "What are you spacing out for? Take him away. Put him down." Long Fei said. Gu refused. How could he put Rue down when he was already in such a state? The ground was covered in snow, so Rue would definitely roll around in the snow as soon as he set him down. Gu strode over and handed Rue to Long Fei, but Long Fei backed away. Normally, Rue would cry in his arms, much less now. It wasn't that he didn't want to, but that he couldn't. Gu shoved Rue into Long Fei's arms, who immediately backed away. Only then did Rue realize that his father was here. He looked at his father with teary eyes and suddenly cried even louder. "Long Fei, what are you doing? Even a strict father shouldn't be like this. How old is he?" Gu was furious. Seeing that Rue had discovered his father, he simply set him down. "Rue, go find your father. Go. If your father doesn't want you, Godfather will take you away right now. We'll go far, far away and never come back." Rue didn't roll to the ground, but stood in place with his hands clenched into fists. His large, red eyes stared pitifully at Long Fei. "Father, sob, sob, father, father." The more he looked, the more he cried. He cried so hard that he almost melted himself. No one knew how much Long Fei's heart hurt at this moment. He didn't know what to do with this son of his. Finally, Gu was puzzled. What's wrong with Rue? If she was crying for her father, shouldn't she be running into Long Fei's arms instead? Why is Rue standing in place? Why is he looking at Long Fei so pitifully and innocently? Suddenly, Long Fei roared at the shadow guard beside him. "Where's Su Donglin? If you don't bring Granny Zhao here, I'll cripple him." Rue actually ran to him and hugged his legs. "Father, father, hug, hug." Long Fei was stunned. It had been almost a year, but his son had never taken the initiative to approach him, let alone ask for a hug. Chapter 12:31. Long Fei didn't know how to react to Rue's request for a hug. This was the first time since his son was born. This was also the hope he had hidden deep in his heart. Even Han Yunxi might not understand. He had never been hugged by his father, and the number of times he had been hugged by his mother could be counted on one hand. Even if there were, it was just a hug and a pat on his shoulder. Perhaps he was destined to be a child who wasn't loved, a child who had to grow up early. However, this didn't stop him from hugging and doting on Rue. It was because he had experienced it that he understood the child's desire and hoped to give it to him. Rue cried even louder when he saw that his father wasn't moving. He grabbed his father's robe and stepped on it, rubbing against his father's body. Finally, Long Fei recovered his wits and scooped up Rue in his arms. If he could, he'd melt the boy into his flesh. How much love did he have for him? "Daddy's here. Don't be afraid. Good boy." Daddy's here. In the dark night, no one noticed that Long Fei Ye's eyes were filled with tears. Rue really stopped crying, unlike before when he was hugged in his father's arms. Rue's little hands wrapped tightly around his father's neck. He lowered his head and buried it in his father's chest. Gu didn't know what to say as he watched from the side. He could only sigh inwardly. In the end, he was someone else's son. Rue had stopped crying, but Long Fei Yi sensed that Rue was trembling in fear. Although Long Fei dearly wanted to hold her a little longer and let him lean on him, he was rational towards the boy and cold toward himself. He immediately pulled Rue out of his arms. Rue looked up, and he saw her biting his lips tightly with a face full of fear. Now Gu Qishao noticed something strange as well. How could this be? Rue, what's wrong? Tell Daddy that you can talk to Daddy properly. Don't be afraid. Long Fei Yi asked seriously. Rue looked at him and didn't say anything for a long time. His eyes were filled with tears, and he was still in a daze. Good girl, tell me why. What are you afraid of? Long Fei Yi asked again. Rue's trembling intensified. His expression was one of unimaginable fear. Long Fei's heart clenched at the sight. Long Fei Yi remained patient and asked seriously, Are you afraid of Daddy? Tell me yes or no. Rue bit his lip and didn't say anything, but he shook his head without hesitation. Long Fei Yi had asked Rue more than once, but Rue always shook his head. Regardless of whether he was awake during the day or at night, he would always shake his head when he was crying in a daze. But his most instinctive reaction was clearly fear. Then what are you afraid of? Long Fei Yi was so anxious that he forgot that Rue wasn't completely awake at this moment. This was a mess. The child's consciousness wasn't clear, and he wouldn't remember when he woke up tomorrow. Rue didn't make a sound. He stared at his father, his teary eyes full of innocence and fear. However, he reached out again and hugged his father's neck tightly, as if he would never let go. Long Fei Yi knew that he should push Rue away, but he couldn't resist in the end. He hugged Rue for a while, his large hands protecting Rue in his embrace. Even if the sky fell, he would hold it up for Rue forever. When Rue was awake, it was instinctive for him to cry and be afraid in his arms. But when he was messing around in the middle of the night without a clear consciousness, all his reactions were the most realistic and instinctive reactions. So Rue wanted him to hug him. When Rue was awake, how much did he endure because of that inexplicable fear? Just like himself in the past, looking at his cold and heartless mother, his only relative, how much did he endure? That feeling of forbearance was like suffering. Enduring until he grew up, enduring until he didn't lose that desire. However, back then, he had never thought that his father and mother would leave him before he could even grow up. They had left him forever. The people left behind only recognized his identity as the East Qin Crown Prince, treating him as someone who wouldn't be sad or miss, placing all the responsibilities of his father and mother on his shoulders. From that time on, he lived alone, cold and lonely because he only had subordinates, no family, no relatives. Long Fei Yi hadn't thought about the past for more than 10 years. He buried his head in Rue's shoulder and planted a heavy kiss on Rue's body. He swore in a low voice, Xinyuan Rue, don't be afraid. Daddy won't leave. Daddy will always wait for you. Wait until you're not afraid of Daddy anymore. After he said this, he resolutely pulled away Rue's hand and handed him to Zhao Mama, who had just arrived. Although Rue was tightly hugging him, he was trembling very hard. There must be a reason for this. If he let Rue continue to be afraid, he didn't know what would happen. He could only be ruthless. Zhao Mama hugged Rue, but who would have thought that Rue would continue to cry? Granny Zhao didn't know what to do. Apart from father and mother, Little Master only wanted her at night. Actually, Zhao Mama had been guarding the Little Master the entire time to prevent him from making a fuss when he woke up and saw Gu. She had just left because she had something to do. Little Master, look at this old servant. It's Zhao Mama. Look at this. Little Master, wake up. It's morning. It's time to wake up. Zhao Mama coaxed him while signaling Su Donglin to bring the lantern closer and shine it on the little master's face. A naughty child couldn't be comforted, only sober him up. Helpless, Ruaer still cried. Just like when he was in Gu's arms, he cried and struggled with all his might. Ruaer was so strong that Zhao Mama couldn't even hold him while standing. In a moment of carelessness, Ruaer slipped down. As soon as Ruaer slid down, he turned and pounced on Long Fei, hugging his legs tightly. He cried and begged, "Daddy, I want Daddy. Daddy, carry me." This scene made Granny Zhao cry. Su Donglin turned his head away, not daring to look. He secretly wiped the tears from the corners of his eyes. The more Gu watched, the more distressed and confused he felt. He huffed and urged, "Long Fei, what are you doing? If you don't carry him, I'll take him away." Gu couldn't wait to rush over and protect Ruaer in his arms. Long Fei looked down at his son and kept rubbing his little head, finally sighing softly. He didn't say anything and picked up Ruaer. Using Qinggong, he quickly flew in the direction of Narcissa's courtyard. Ruaer didn't cry along the way, but his trembling didn't stop. Long Fei knew very well that after this, he wouldn't carry Ruaer again unless Ruaer was no longer afraid of him. He especially wanted the road to Narcissa's courtyard to be longer and longer. But what was the use of a long road? He was very fast and arrived at Narcissa's courtyard in a short while. He carried Ruaer to the warm tea room. Ruaer seemed to be asleep. He didn't cry or make a fuss, only trembling in his arms. Long Fei's furrowed brows hadn't relaxed since just now. He placed Ruaer on the bed. Ruaer sniffed the familiar scent and saw his mother. He whimpered and crawled to his mother's side. He found a place to lie down next to his mother, stuck his little butt up, and put his face on the blanket. He quieted down. He seemed sad and aggrieved. After a moment of silence, he sniffled and whimpered a few more times before completely quieting down and falling asleep. At this moment, he didn't have the temper he had during the day. He was cold and aloof, just like a clingy little bug. Long Fei stood at the side and watched. He looked at Ruaer's pure lotus-like face and Han Yunxi's sleeping face. He was clearly sad and helpless, but the corner of his mouth couldn't help but curl into a faint smile. It was warmth and happiness. Many times, suffering was only because of loneliness. If one had loved ones by their side, no matter how difficult it was, it wouldn't be difficult, right? Long Fei found a blanket and carefully covered Ruaer with it. He sat down beside and Han Yunxi and leaned against the high pillow. Long Fei never got tired of looking at the mother and son's sleeping faces. As he watched, he fell into deep thought. Originally, seeing that Ruaer was normal in all aspects, he and Han Yunxi planned to wait for another year and a half. Perhaps Ruaer would be able to tell them the reason when he grew up. But tonight, looking at his helpless son, his heart felt like it was being torn apart. It hurt so much that even breathing was difficult. Gu Beiwa once said that this might have something to do with the murderous aura on his body. The stronger the internal energy, the stronger the murderous aura. Children were the most sensitive, and Ruaer might be too sensitive. Perhaps he had to make a trip to Sky Mountain or find a way to meet Hanshun. Hanshun might know more about the lust bite power than his master. On New Year's Eve, Long Fei leaned against his wife and son and unknowingly fell asleep. Tang Li was also sleeping peacefully beside his wife and daughter. The snow was getting heavier and heavier. Number 7 tea house was silent. Only the whistling of the north wind could be heard. Gu had already returned to Shiha courtyard. At this moment, he was soaking in the tea pool. Leaning against the shore, he raised his head and casually spread his arms out on the shore. The tea reached his chest. His body had recovered for more than a year. His chest muscles were well-defined, and his shoulders and back were well-defined. He was so sexy that it caused one's imagination to run wild. Coupled with his gorgeous face, he was simply the best of evildoers. He closed his eyes, allowing the snow to fall on his face and shoulders. Before the snow covered his entire face, he chuckled. Another year. The first year is over, huh? Another year had passed. His age could be increased. The first year of his rebirth. There would be many more years in the future. Number 7 tea house returned to the silence of night. At this moment, Gu Beiwe had just returned to his residence. After the founding of the country, Gu Beiwe was the busiest of all the civil and military officials in the court. Thanks to these months of busyness, he had some free time in the coming days. After all, the crown prince was still too young and couldn't be considered sensible. There wasn't much that needed teaching. The Imperial Academy of Medicine had been rebuilt and all the positions had been properly assigned. As for the matter of merging Medical City and Medicine City under the Imperial Academy of Medicine's jurisdiction, it was an important matter that couldn't be rushed. He was still preparing. He used Qin Min's poor health as an excuse to ask for leave from Long Fei Yi and take Qin Min to the south. Chapter 1232. Gu Beiwe took Qin Min to the south and bought a quiet small house in Ningzhou, a famous city in the south of the Yangtze River, and lived there. Except for their personal servants, they didn't hire any other servants. In this house, Qin Min didn't have to stuff clothes in her belly and pretend to be pregnant like in Yuning. She didn't have to pretend to be disabled and sit in a wheelchair all the time. Everything had become much more relaxed. Other than the young maidservant by her side, no one else knew how much she wanted to run around after her legs recovered. In Yuning, the Gu mansion had all kinds of scruples. Moreover, with Gu Beiwe's cautious character, she didn't dare to be presumptuous, so she could only endure. Hiding the truth about her legs and continuing to sit in a wheelchair was both her idea and Gu Beiwe's idea. She wanted to find out who did this to her, and Gu Beiwe wanted to find out the mole in the Qin family and take the opportunity to change the situation of the several families in the medical city. Although Gu Beiwe was the director, it was not easy to take the medical college under the jurisdiction of the imperial court. He needed an opportunity and the support of the several families in the medical city, whether voluntary or forced. Back in Yuning's Gu estate, she had to put on a show sometimes, so she and Gu Beiwe interacted more often. Now that they were in Ningzhou, she and Gu Beiwe had gone their separate ways. Gu Beiwe was a very quiet person, in front of people and behind closed doors. She was different. She liked quiet, but she didn't like noisy people. She was silent in front of people. She knew everything in her heart, but she didn't say it out loud. She didn't argue. She pretended to be stupid and kept a low profile. In private, she was not a quiet and gentle woman, but a very troublesome person. She liked to study acupuncture and could make her own gold needles. She liked to plant flowers and plants in the yard and didn't mind getting mud all over. She liked to decorate the room clean and beautiful and occasionally change the furnishings. She liked to make pastries by herself and stayed in the kitchen for the whole afternoon. She liked to play the zither and paint. Recently, she even learned to dance. She was a person full of love for life. She liked quiet, but could live a lively life in her independent small world. She treated people very well, but she also had a temper. When she was serious, her temper was not small. Her temperament looked very similar to Gu Beiwe's, but in reality, they were very different. Gu Beiwe was so quiet that it made her feel bored. She also knew that her living habits might disturb Gu Beiwe. In Yuning's house, she always put Gu Beiwe first and tried her best not to disturb him. After all, he was her husband. He was the luckiest and safest home in her life. He was the benefactor who had saved her from the Qin family. In Ningzhou, she was much more at ease. For one thing, no acquaintances came to visit or disturb them. She and Gu Beiwe didn't give face to the local officials in Ningzhou. They didn't want to see them. Secondly, the mansion in Ningzhou wasn't big, but it had 2 independent courtyards. She and Gu Beiwe didn't have much to worry about. From the first day they moved in, they each lived in one courtyard and lived their own lives. The day before New Year's Eve, Gu Beiwe said that he would come over to have dinner with her. Qin Min also happened to be going over to invite him. The two looked at each other and smiled. Gu Beiwe said, "Come over when it's dark. Something simple is fine. There's no need to prepare too much." Qin Min said jokingly, "Can I buy some fireworks to pay for the meal?" Gu Beiwe smiled and agreed. Qin Min prepared a table of dishes. There wasn't much, but all of them were her best dishes. She waited for Gu Beiwe with the attitude of a friend from the medical community who shared the same ideals. After her legs were crippled, She no longer had any friends. The only person she could talk to was the little maidservant beside her. Unfortunately, when it was dark, Gu Beiyue's servant came over and said that Gu Beiyue had an urgent matter and had gone out. Qi Min waited until it was late at night. Gu Beiyue came over alone. His figure was like a shadow as he silently landed outside the house. He saw that the door was open and the dishes on the table had turned cold. Qi Min was lying on the table and sleeping. Her maidservant was leaning against a pillar at the side, dozing off. Gu Beiyue entered and saw that the dishes on the table had not been touched. He frowned. At this time, the maidservant woke up in a daze. When she saw him, she exclaimed, "Son-in-law." Qi Min immediately raised her head and stared at Gu Beiyue with sleepy eyes, a little dazed. "Eldest Miss Qin, I'm sorry to have kept you waiting for so long," Gu Beiyue said gently. Qi Min regained her senses this time. She patted her face and hurriedly got up. "Headmaster, don't stand on ceremony. You haven't eaten yet, right?" She asked the maidservant to quickly heat up the dishes. Gu Beiyue did not stop her. When a maidservant finished heating up the dishes, Gu Beiyue said, "I've eaten outside. You should eat. It's New Year's Eve. If you don't eat, you'll starve for a year." Qi Min was stunned. Then she burst out laughing. "Headmaster, you believe this is a lie to a child?" Gu Beiyue personally scooped a bowl of soup and handed it to her. He said mildly, "I'll sit with you for a while. You should eat. Since you're already here to eat, you can't miss the appointment." Was Gu Beiyue worried that she would not eat and persuaded her mother? Qi Min chuckled and said honestly, "Even if you don't eat, I'll eat. I'm really hungry. This is fresh mushroom soup. After heating it up, the taste is much worse, but it's still quite good. Do you want to try a bowl?" Gu Beiyue was slightly stunned. His gaze fell on Qi Min's face. Only then did Qi Min retract her smile. She realized that she might have said too much. It was strange. She was always very calm and collected in front of others. Why couldn't she remain calm in front of Gu Beiyue? Qi Min thought that she must have been dazed from sleep. She secretly told herself that she should be more careful in the future. After all, they lived together. It would be bad to disturb this great benefactor's peace. Gu Beiyue only felt that Qi Min seemed a little different from usual. However, he couldn't pinpoint exactly what was wrong. Qi Min thanked him and lowered her head to drink the soup quietly. She didn't dare to look at him again. "Eldest Miss Qin, I will set off for Medical City tomorrow," Gu Beiyue said mildly. "I just went out to see a patient. The situation is complicated and dangerous. I plan to personally send him to Medical City and hand him over to Deputy Shan." Qi Min raised her head and nodded seriously. Gu Beiyue had only asked for a month and a half's leave. It was a long journey from Ningzhou to Medical City. Moreover, he couldn't walk fast with a patient. Such a round trip would take more than a month and a half. Be careful on the way. If time is tight, you don't have to come back. Go directly to Yuning, Qi Min said seriously. "I will arrange the child's matter properly. Don't worry." They were going south this time to give birth to a child. Gu Beiyue adopted a baby boy who was almost 1 year old. It didn't match the time of her fake birth. There was a difference of nearly a year. Gu Beiyue planned to let her give birth in the south, and then let her stay in Jiangnan to recuperate until the child was a little older. When he was 3 or 4 years old, he would take it back to Yuning. After all, it was difficult to tell the child's age between 3 and 5 years old. Gu Beiyue promised that in the next few years, he would definitely let her find the person who poisoned the Qin family. Qi Min was also happy with such an arrangement. She could be free for a few years. When she returned to Yuning, she didn't have to pretend to be pregnant or lame. She could also work in a medical school. Her life wouldn't be so restrained. "Thank you for your hard work," Gu Beiyue said politely. "It's my duty," Qi Min said with a smile. Gu Beiyue didn't stay for long. Qi Min hadn't even finished a bowl of soup when he was about to leave. "It's cold outside. I won't send you off. Rest early," Gu Beiyue said lightly. Qi Min was quite indifferent at first, but for some reason, when she saw Gu Beiyue's lonely figure walking away, she couldn't help but chase after him. "Let's send you off. It's New Year's Eve." Gu Beiyue didn't refuse. The two of them walked side by side and quietly walked to the gate. "Miss Qin, please wait," Gu Beiyue said lightly. Director, have a safe trip, Chi Min said seriously. Gu Beiwe had already left, but he turned back and said, Miss Chin, I brought the fireworks. They're on the coffee table in your room. Chi Min waved her hand and said politely, Thank you. Seeing that Gu Beiwe's figure had disappeared into the cold night, Chi Min put down her hand and muttered to herself, He didn't even eat. Why did he leave money for the meal? She returned to her room and indeed saw the fireworks that Gu Beiwe had left behind. She was stunned for a moment, then suddenly became anxious. Xiaoyao, quick, bring me a lighter. Let's go set off the fireworks. She was so anxious that she turned and ran. She accidentally tripped over the threshold and fell heavily to the ground. Seeing this, the maidservant Xiaoyao hurried over to help her up. Miss, what's wrong? Where did you fall? Does it hurt? She got up and, ignoring the pain, snatched the maidservant's lighter and ran into the courtyard. Soon, she lit the fireworks. Following the popping sounds, gorgeous flowers bloomed in the sky. She stood under the sky, full of fireworks, looking up and smiling. So beautiful. Gu Beiwe hadn't gone far yet. He looked back and saw the resplendent fireworks in the sky. It was gorgeous and beautiful. He paused until all the fireworks were gone, then turned to leave. How long would it be before they could meet again after this parting? Gu Beiwe gradually walked away. Qin Min stood in the courtyard and stared blankly at the ashes on the ground. Xiaoyao pulled her over and looked her up and down. Miss, were you hurt just now? Does it hurt? Miss, your leg has just recovered. You can't fall. Miss, why are you so anxious? Qin Min let Xiaoyao nag for a long time before she looked over and muttered, Xiaoyao, I can't bear to part with him. Xiaoyao was stunned for a moment before replying, Miss, this servant can't bear to part with the son-in-law either. It's the new year. The son-in-law is really a good person. Qin Min stared at Xiaoyao for a long time. Finally, she smiled helplessly and returned to her room without saying anything else. Xiaoyao, this silly girl. There was a dinner and fireworks. Gu Beiwe and Qin Min could be considered to have passed New Year's Eve. There was one person's New Year's Eve that didn't have a dinner or fireworks, only wine. This person was none other than Ning Cheng, who had been missing for a long time. On the grassland north of Winter Crow Country, a bonfire burned fiercely, its flames soaring into the sky. The men of Winter Crow Country weren't afraid of the cold. They were all wearing fox skin vests and gathered around the bonfire, drinking and eating meat. Ning Cheng was among them. His attire wasn't much different from the men of Winter Crow Country, and his strength was no different from the men of Winter Crow Country. The only difference was that the men of Winter Crow Country ate meat, while Ning Cheng only drank. If one didn't look carefully, no one would be able to tell that this guy was the master of the D clan, the former great general of the north. While they drank and drank, female slaves emerged from the surrounding tents. One of them sat down by Ning Cheng's side. Chapter 1233. The female slave by Ning Cheng's side had blonde hair, blue eyes, and a fiery figure. She didn't look like a member of the Winter Crow clan, but more like a member of the Tanda clan from the west of the mysterious continent. It wasn't strange for the Winter Crow clan slave traders to set foot in the mysterious continent. Unlike Cloud Realm continent, which forbade slave trading, the mysterious continent was free to do so. Slaves were different from servants. Slaves were never free, but their masters could use them for free. They could kill as they pleased, and their children would remain slaves forever. Servants, on the other hand, were paid wages and could leave as soon as their contracts were up. Slave trading was a lucrative business. Supposedly, Ning Cheng understood that the Winter Crow clan's biggest slave traders weren't from their own clan, but from the mysterious continent. Ning Cheng had headed south after leaving Northern Li to tour Jiangnan. He wanted to visit all of the famous wineries there before picking a good place to open his own. But who knew? Long Fei Yi had actually taken control of all of Cloud Realm Continent's biggest wineries. Now he couldn't open a winery, nor find a place to drink good wine. He knew that Long Fei Yi was forcing him to show himself, but he refused. If he'd tricked Long Fei Yi with that bet, he was more than willing to bear the infamy of going back on his word and have the Long Fei Yi bear a grudge for the rest of his life. Without wine to drink, he could only head north and escape Long Fei Yi's sphere of influence to Winter Crow Country. Winter Crow Country's wines were all strong liquors to his liking. Since he was already in the Winter Crow clan, he had nothing better to do, so he started to investigate Goldie's background. In just a few months, he got together with the biggest slave merchant in the Winter Crow clan, Lu Zheng. Lu Zheng came from a mysterious continent and was a martial arts trash. He couldn't survive there, so he joined the Lubei Trade Consortium in his 20s to engage in slave trading. Now he was in his 60s, but he was still unmarried and had no children. In recent years, he'd been searching for a successor. If it was anyone else, they might not be able to win Lu Zheng's favor even after years of effort. But Ning Cheng was still the master of Cloud Realm Trade Consortium. He had both money and business acumen, so it wasn't difficult for him to win Lu Zheng's favor. The grassland Ning Cheng was within Lu Zheng's sphere of influence. At this moment, Lu Zheng was sitting across from Ning Cheng, looking at him in a drunken stupor. The dozen or so people around him were Lu Zheng's trusted subordinates. Ning Cheng was not interested in the slave trade. Back then, Ning Cheng had half-jokingly offered to work with him to resell slaves. He had also proposed to expand his business to the mysterious continent, but Ning Cheng had not agreed. Although Lu Zheng's slave trade was very profitable, and he could use this opportunity to make friends with many influential people on the mysterious continent, Ning Cheng was not interested at all. Without the D-Clan's mission, he felt much more at ease. No matter how big a business empire he wanted, he could build it with his own hands. There was no need to take other people's plates. He found a man who'd sold Jin Zi out of Winter Crow Country, then followed the man's trail and found something suspicious. If it was Winter Crow Country slaves, they'd usually come from small slave traders who bought their goods from various slave owners. Then they'd be sold to larger slave traders, who would then sell them out of Winter Crow Country to Cloud Realm Continent or the Mysterious Continent. Most of these slaves were from Winter Crow Country. Winter Crow Country was a nation of slaves. 2/3 of the population were slaves. Slaves would always be slaves, and so would their descendants. They had no chance to change their fortunes, because they were branded with the mark of slave as soon as they were born. As long as their masters didn't need them, they'd write out an indenture contract to sell them off as well. Another group of slaves came from Cloud Realm Continent or the Mysterious Continent. They were either abducted, adopted, or sold off for other reasons. These people would come to Winter Crow Country and sell them to slave owners. Once they were branded with Winter Crow Country's unique slave mark, they'd be sold off for a different price. Generally speaking, both Winter Crow Country slaves and foreign slaves would only be bought and sold 3 or 4 times between Winter Crow Country slave traders and slave traders. But Ning Cheng discovered that Jin Zi's indenture contracts had been sold between Winter Crow Country slave traders and slave traders a total of 10 times. At first, Jin Zi had been sold from one of Yu Zheng's subordinates, Uncle Gong. But Uncle Gong didn't know which slave owner he'd bought Jin Zi from, and which slave owner had opened Jin Zi's indenture contract. Ning Cheng couldn't find any clues. Now that Uncle Gong had passed away, Ning Cheng had snuck into the Lubei Trade Consortium. He investigated all of Uncle Gong's slave trades, but didn't find any clues. At the same time, he searched through all of Winter Crow Country, but didn't find a second person who understood the language of beasts. He began to suspect that Jin Zi wasn't a member of Winter Crow Country, but someone from the Mysterious Continent. Uncle Gong's previous records must have been destroyed by someone else. There had to be something fishy going on here. If he wanted to find out Jin Zi's true identity, he had to figure out how Jin Zi had been sold to Winter Crow Country as a slave. It was late at night, and everyone was drunk. Ning Cheng seemed to be drunk as well, but he was actually very sober. Yu Zheng had rewarded everyone with Winter Crow girls as a reward, but he'd given Ning Cheng a girl from another race. Whether it was a special benefit or a test, no one knew. The blonde beauty seemed to know Ning Cheng's preferences well. She picked up a jar of wine as soon as she arrived and downed it with a tilt of her head. The people around them looked over and started to jeer. Ning Chung sat on the ground and leaned back. He arched an eyebrow as he watched the beauty drink with great interest. Even if he was blind in one eye and wore a blindfold, it didn't make him look handsome or noble at all. That eye alone could easily captivate people's souls when he was bewitching. His evil smile mesmerized all of the female slaves present. The blonde beauty finished the wine and smashed the jar to pieces. She rested one hand on Ning Cheng's shoulder while the other picked up a jug of wine. Slowly, she drew closer to Ning Cheng's body, her enchanting figure and seductive movements drawing whistles from the crowd. Ning Cheng glanced at the jeering crowd and smiled even more brilliantly. He yelled, "Drink!" As soon as he raised his head and opened his mouth, the blonde beauty straddled him and poured the wine into his mouth. Ning Cheng drank in large mouthfuls, letting the overflowing wine wet his face, hair, and clothes. He was carefree and unrestrained. Soon, the jar was empty. The blonde beauty had just tossed the jar away when Ning Cheng, who had been leaning back, suddenly leaned forward and pushed the blonde beauty to the ground. The screams and whistles around them grew even louder. The drunk Lu Zheng also laughed out loud. Good alcohol tolerance. Ning Cheng looked over and casually grabbed a jar of wine and threw it over. Even if the other people present were too drunk, they wouldn't dare to be so rude to Lu Zheng. But Ning Cheng dared. Lu Zheng caught the wine and happily drank it in large mouthfuls. Ning Cheng's attention returned to the blonde beauty. The corner of his mouth hooked up into a devilish arc. He grabbed the wine and poured it into the beauty's mouth. His action catered to the wicked taste of the people present. The jeering became louder and louder. After the blonde beauty was poured a jar of wine, she was completely drunk. Like an octopus, she clung on to Ning Cheng and didn't let go. Her hand reached into Ning Cheng's clothes as if she wanted to undress him. Ning Cheng purposely pried her hand away and gave a drunken burp. "Beauty, there's no rush. Hee, this gentleman will definitely serve you well tonight," he said drunkenly. As he spoke, he got up and held the blonde beauty's waist with one hand and lifted a jar of wine with the other. He waved at Lu Zheng and turned to walk toward the tent not far away. Lu Zheng laughed and hugged a female slave, letting his brothers continue to drink. After a while, everyone returned with beauties in their arms and dispersed. At this time, a tall and slender young woman quietly walked into the tent where Lu Zheng was staying. Lu Zheng wasn't drunk. The female slave he brought in kneeled behind him and massaged him. Under the light, this young woman was dressed in black. She had a pretty face and a pair of iconic red phoenix eyes. She was very beautiful. She was none other than Lu Zheng's most beloved goddaughter, the eldest miss of Liu Bei Chamber of Commerce, Lulu. Many people who didn't know the situation thought that Lulu was Lu Zheng's biological daughter. She let the female slave leave and personally massaged her godfather. "Father, the female slave I arranged for Cheng is pretty good, right?" Lulu asked. Ning Cheng entered Liu Bei Chamber of Commerce as an orphan. He didn't have a surname, only a given name. Everyone called him Cheng. Whether she's good or not, we'll know after he uses her. "Huh?" Lu Zheng laughed. Lulu laughed. "Don't all men like that? I guarantee that Ning Cheng will keep her. I'll sell one to father. If it's not good, I'll pay you 3 times the price. If it's good, I'll sell father some tonics so that father and grandfather won't tire themselves out and hurt their bodies. You little girl, you might as well be a brothel keeper." Lu Zheng pulled Lulu in front of him and scolded her with a frown. "If you continue to be so mischievous, be careful that you won't be able to get married." Lu Zheng trusted Ning Cheng completely, but Lulu was still on guard against him. Thus, he arranged for someone to stay by his side and keep an eye on him. In order to guarantee that Ning Cheng would keep the female slave, Lul especially found the blonde beauty, Shaikyu. Shaikyu was not only beautiful, but also good in bed. "It's good that I can't get married. Father can give Liu Bei Chamber of Commerce to me. Father can enjoy life. I promise to show filial piety to father every year." Lul said happily. One had to know that in Liu Bei Chamber of Commerce, There were countless people who wanted to control this business, but they didn't dare to show it. Lulu, however, never avoided it. Perhaps it was because she dared to think, speak, and act that Lu Zheng loved her dearly. Lu Zheng pulled Lu Li's hand and patted it gently. He said earnestly, "Daughter, father wants to ask you seriously. How is Ah Cheng?" "Everything is good except that he's blind in one eye. His background is unknown," Lulu answered without thinking. "If we find out his background and prove that he has no disloyalty to Liu Bei Chamber of Commerce, are you willing to marry him?" Lu Zheng asked again. Lu Zheng wanted to pass the business to Lulu, but Lulu was a woman. Those in the slave trade were mostly men. Lulu would more or less be at a disadvantage if she dealt with those men. If she could marry Ah Cheng, the two of them could take over Liu Bei Chamber of Commerce. Then, he could rest assured and return to his original family. After leaving home for decades, he would eventually return to his roots. Lu Zheng hadn't taken a wife for so many years because his family had extremely high requirements for bloodline. Even if he was a good-for-nothing, he couldn't marry a woman from the mysterious continent. Lula thought for a moment and said with a grin, "Sure, I'll ask Shakio later. If Ah Cheng is a good man, I'll consider it." Chapter 1234. Lu Zheng snapped angrily. Could it be that his daughter hung out with a bunch of men every day and got used to dirty jokes? Why wasn't she ashamed at all? Lila wasn't afraid of Lu Zheng's anger. She laughed. "Daddy, I won't disturb you anymore. I'm going to set off the fireworks." At this time, Ning Cheng had already drunk Shakyu. He bent down and was about to tear off Shakyu's clothes when he seemed to think of something. He got up and slashed Shakyu's clothes with his sword energy. Then, he tossed the bedding over without even looking at Shakyu. He lay down on the warm couch and closed his eyes to rest. But not long after, the fireworks outside the window woke him up. He looked at the fireworks that were constantly blooming and disappearing, and gradually fell into deep thought. He thought that Lu Zheng wouldn't use this method to test him. This slave Shakyu must be Miss Lu Li's servant. Uncle Gong had passed away. The slave trade that Uncle Gong personally handled was all big business. Only Lu Zheng knew the accounts. If Jin Zi's background wasn't simple, then Lu Zheng would definitely remember it. Ning Cheng didn't dare to alert Lu Zheng before he fully gained his trust. He knew that in the coming days, he would have to deal with Shakyu and Shakyu's master, Lulu. On New Year's Eve, he suddenly thought of Jin Zi. He worked so hard for Jin Zi. If Jin Zi, that cold-hearted guy, knew, would he be touched? In fact, if it weren't for the wine, he might not have stayed for long, of course. Jin Zi didn't know what Ning Cheng did for him. He also didn't know that Ning Cheng was in the Winter Crow tribe that he had yearned for many years. In such a cold night, he was still on his way. Northern Li still needed food aid from the south this winter. This winter was also cold. Many places in the north of Northern Li had snow disasters. Many roads were buried in snow. So, even if there was enough food, it couldn't be delivered to the victims. 2 months ago, Han Yunchi sent elite troops from the Western Army, Bailey Army, and Southern Army to Northern Li to help the Ning Army and the Black Clan Army with disaster relief. She also announced that after disaster relief, there would be a big reward. Although the various military factions fought fiercely in secret, everyone was still united and cooperated with each other in Northern Li. However, it was New Year's Eve, and they still had to clear the road and transport the food through the snow. It was inevitable that some of the soldiers who were sent out would complain. Jin Zi had been tired for a few days. Originally, he wanted to take advantage of the New Year's Eve to sleep in his tent. However, when he heard that the soldiers who complained were from the Bailey military faction, and that there were signs of trouble, he couldn't sleep. At the beginning of the country, there were many things waiting to be done. Most of the money in the imperial court was used on the blade. Part of the food for the disaster relief in Northern Li was donated by Long Fei Ye's own granary, and the other part was donated by the grain merchants in Jiangnan and the central region under Long Fei Ye's compulsion. Because of this incident, the Southern Army requested to lead the disaster relief operation in Northern Li, but it was rejected by Long Fei Yi in the end. Jinzi knew about Bailey Yuanlong's collusion with the Southern Army. He had followed Ningcheng for more than a year, so he was well aware of the secret struggles between the various military factions. He knew very well that if he didn't personally make an appearance tonight and keep an eye on those people, even a small matter would be stirred up into a big dispute and cause a huge commotion. Then, this New Year's Eve would be lively in the military. Jinzi personally picked up the shovel and shoveled the snow with the soldiers. He personally pulled the carriage, carrying the food forward on foot. With this, who would dare complain behind his back? After crossing the hill, everyone stopped to rest. A soldier brought over hot water. "General, it's hot. It'll get cold in a while." Jinzi drank a few mouthfuls and let the soldier drink it himself. The soldier immediately left, not daring to stay by his side for too long. They rested for a while before leaving, so there was no need to light a fire. The weather wasn't good either, so everyone huddled together to keep each other warm. Jinzi was the only one who stood far away. He leaned against the carriage and wrapped his cloak tightly around himself. His head was lowered. His short hair and shoulders were covered in snow. He was especially thin and stood there quietly, aloof and mysterious. He didn't look like a general at all. In the military, he was actually more intimidating than Ningcheng. If Ningcheng was here, there would be some people in the Ning family army who would rely on their seniority to take advantage of their seniority. However, when he stood in the army, no one dared to make a sound. Because no one was familiar with him, they didn't understand him and couldn't figure him out. He raised a group of tiger army consisting of more than 10 big tigers. Although he didn't usually take them out for a stroll, everyone remembered and was afraid of him. They didn't dare to easily approach him. The bone-chilling northern wind rose again, blowing away the snowflakes on Jinzi's hair and shoulders. It also made his cloak billow in the wind. Everyone felt cold and hugged the people around them tighter. However, Jinzi let the north wind blow and didn't react much. He played with a gold card in his hand. That gold card was returned to him by Mu Linger. He also wanted to forget that girl. However, he stayed in Northern Li and took over this mess for Ningcheng. It was all for that girl. Being in Northern Li, facing all these annoying things, how could he forget the instigator? He thought that he must have bullied that girl badly in his previous life. She must have tortured him like this in this life. If he continued to bully her miserably in this life, then would he still meet her in the next life? Thinking of this, Jinzi suddenly laughed. He called for the imperial bodyguard and handed the gold card to him. He instructed in a low voice, "Send someone to buy grain at high price. Buy as much as you can, no matter how expensive it is." This gold card was under Mu Linger's name. After he used up the money she owed him, if there was an overdraft, she would naturally have to pay it back. Anyway, the bank would only look for her and not him. In this life, if love was too late, bullying her was also a happy thing. Jinzi seemed to have seen Mu Linger rushing in front of him and stomping her feet in anger. The corners of his mouth couldn't help but curl into a beautiful arc. He suddenly felt that this New Year's Eve was a little boring. A year ago, everyone knew that Northern Li was short on grain. How many unscrupulous merchants were secretly hoarding grain and waiting to raise the price? How could Mu Linger, who was about to be drowned in debt, know that Jinzi, who hadn't interacted with her for several months, would trick her like this on New Year's Eve? When she returned to Medicine City, she took in many disciples and adopted a few orphans. She carefully selected the talented ones and personally taught them medical knowledge. Little and Chun Xiang were both learning from her. She also borrowed Lil Thing from Gu Beiyue. When spring came, she would conduct a large inspection in Medical City. She would examine all the fake and substandard products. When she borrowed Lil Thing from Gu Beiyue, she told her big sister about it, so she'd left her a message. The original words were, "If Lil Thing is willing to become a dog, you can take it with you." She didn't know how Gu Beiyue communicated with Lil Thing, but it actually agreed to come with her to Medicine City. It had to be said that Lil Thing's nose was much more sensitive than a dog's. It could tell the authenticity of Medicine City with a single sniff. Of course, one Lil Thing was far from enough, so she sent people to find 10 dogs to train. After spring came, she would be even busier. Not only did she have to establish a medicine control board, but she also had to cooperate with BUS operations in Medical City. She had never thought that she would one day return to Northernly after leaving home for a long time after she was almost tricked into marrying him off. She had always been unhappy in the Moo family, but now that she was back, she was actually living a carefree life. It was late at night, and at this moment she was snoring away. Lil Thing was curled up by her feet. Suddenly, 2 dog barks came from outside. Lil Thing immediately raised its head, revealing a vigilant expression. She didn't know how she fell asleep, let alone when Rur came back. She lifted the quilt and saw that she was wearing a spaghetti strap and nightgown. Her ears unconsciously heated up. God knows how long Faye Yi helped her get dressed. Mother, mother, little Ray, called out to her in a childish voice, calling her both names. Han Yunchi was about to hug Rue when she saw a big red packet lying behind him. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.